Welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast. I'm your host, Andy Nolch, and it's okay to be here listening to the good old Strauss. This is the podcast that has everything to do with Scientology. Yes, that odd religion you might have heard about. Today's show is part 2 with Jonathan Burke. Oh, it's a good one. I've actually been having some computer problems recently, so it's going to be a little bit shorter than usual. It's just going to be the interview. But get excited, because the interview is what it's all about. Get ready for it. Come with me on a journey into the Scientology world, the interesting world of Scientology. Oh, there it goes. Got to go down into this rabbit hole, into the interesting world of Scientology, where down is up and up is down, left is right and right is left. What you thought wasn't possible is possible. Welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast, episode 19, part 2 with Jonathan Burke. This interview is a good one, absolutely a good one. I'm a little bit jealous that you're getting to listen to this for the first time. I hope you like it. It's quite out there, as per usual. John's full of a lot of information, and I wanted to see if I could just complete the interview in part 2, but it looks like there's going to have to be a part 3. So you know what that means? It means that the interview was jam-packed and exciting, and we went on tangents that meant that I have to go into a part 3, which I didn't think was going to happen, or I was planning on not happening with interviews, but sometimes some people you need to do a part 3 with. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you like listening to this interview, part 2 with Jonathan Burke. It's now time for part 2 of my interview with Jonathan Burke, the auditor from the Advanced Organization of the Great Plains in Middle America. He's an OT8. He knows a lot, and he knows a lot of outrageous stuff. Are you there, John?
I'm here. How are you?
I'm good. It's a nice and quiet Sunday morning here in Australia. What about you?
It's a loud Saturday night here.
Oh, yep. You in a restaurant or something?
Yeah, I'm at the local pub using their internet.
Oh, yeah. Very clever. Do you do that with McDonald's?
McDonald's internet here in the town that I'm in is a little restrictive. Yeah, terrible would be a good adjective.
All right. Well, I've got some things to ask you about. In your organization, you make some tech training films, don't you?
Yes.
So, out of curiosity, what happened to the ones that LRH made?
Well, the original ones that LRH made were mothballed round about the time that the new academy levels were introduced in, I believe, 1987.
When you say mothballed, do you mean just thrown out? Or hidden away?
Yeah, they were cast aside. Once LRH departed, dropped the body, died, whatever you want to call it, and Miscavige was running things, they decided to...
it's cutting out.
With the exception
can you repeat that, or cut out?
Okay.
What'd you say?
Okay. They decided to redo all of the auditor training films, with the exception of the well, we call it pro-TRs film, or having to do with TRs, the one that Dan Kuhn was in, and Man the Unfathomable, which LRH directed and shot. It was shot with all natural light. They didn't use any electrical light at all because it's supposed to kind of look like a historical piece. So those two remain the same. The Meter Reed's drill film has been changed at least twice, to my knowledge, which is the one that I made for the field.
So with what was this release in the late 80s? Because I know a bit about GAT1 and GAT2, but what was this change that was made in the late 80s?
Well, there was a codification of all of the academy levels, and they were put into binders, 0 through 4. The NED course was recompiled. So was the FPRD course and the solo course as well in the late 87, and introduced from 88 on.
Was there any, from what you know, was there any sort of scrolling done with that, or was that just simply like, put into neat packs and that sort of stuff?
Well, there were changes, which it's something that we could go into as far as what those changes were. I was not privy at the time. I was 19 at the time to what those changes were. But since I've been auditing since 1988, I have found out about a number of changes that occurred as far as, just with the academy levels, and then were introduced onto the St. Hill Special Briefing course, the OT3 course, mainly most of your auditor basics type things. The rudiments, definition and pattern HCOB didn't exist prior to 1988. It was a compilation of different references, kind of cut and paste, put together to make one cohesive rudiments HCOB, because strangely enough, LRH never made one. So it was a little bit of a cryptic thing, and so they felt like it necessitated to show Class 0 auditors.
So just quickly repeat that again, it cut out.
Okay. It was a necessity when they were redoing these new academy level packs that they have something that basically codified the rudiments for Class 0 auditors, and also Method 1, the Method 1 co-audit. But at the time, the Method 1 co-audit was a pilot course, so it didn't get it until later, probably 89 or 90. So that's one of the changes, if you want to call it a change. They're all the changes are all very slight, from 82 to probably 96.
They're very what? Say that again. What was very what?
A lot of the changes were very slight from 82 to about 96, and then with the golden age of tech, the changes were sweeping. So training lineup and how things were done.
And there's also there's sort of secret changes, wasn't there, in the 80s and stuff?
Yeah, but omissions more than anything.
Omissions, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't find out about those, which we could go into the bigger picture as far as what happens to someone when let's say they leave the church and all that. If you want to get into that, we can. But these omissions, they slowly occur, and like LRH says, the hardest thing to spot is the missingness. So that is an incredibly important datum, and also goes in line with the data series as far as omitted data. But omitted data doesn't really describe it because it's a missingness. It's just gone. So if you're trained on something and you don't know that it's missing, you don't know it exists. And this is the problem that we've seen culminate here in the last 7-8 years with guys that have gotten out from the golden age of tech and things like that. Not that there are many, a handful or two at most that continue to audit. But it creates a lot of problems with people because it's the Thetan knows. The Thetan knows there's something wrong, and they'll quit auditing just for the fact that they know something isn't right about the auditing. It isn't flowing the way that it should, even though they don't really know how auditing really flows. But the Thetan really knows, if that makes any sense.
I think it sort of does. Yeah, you have like this innate knowingness. It's a bit interesting.
Yeah.
I was listening to something with Chris Shelton because he finally actually mentioned independent Scientology. So I was like, oh, I got to listen to this. And he was saying something like, well, he commented on it, and of course he commented on it as if he knew, you know, what Scientology was like, independent of the church. And it's just like, I mean, these are two separate things. Like, he doesn't know anything about independent Scientology. Like, he hasn't tried it. He doesn't know what it's like. Like the tech is different. You know what I mean? And it's just interesting because, like, I was listening to something where Captain Bill was talking about the church in 1983. And he was saying, saying the tech's not in the church. And that was in 1983, when it was much more closer to actually being standard. So it's just like, it's just interesting when you hear someone talk about, Scientology, like they all they're doing is, like with Chris, for example, all they're doing is talking about the Church of Scientology. That's all they're talking about. That's all they know about. It's a total different than independent Scientology.
Right. Yeah, well, I posted something about that on our Facebook group, and I think in Scientolopedia on their Facebook group, as far as making the distinction between, or a differentiation between what the Church of Scientology is and what Scientology, the religious philosophy, is. They are markedly different in many ways. I could go to the extreme, and as far as the high end of the bridge, and then I'll go to the low end of the bridge. And I'm not giving any confidential here, but standard LRH Knots procedure has been set aside for an auditing procedure that vaguely resembles Knots procedure, where antagonism is used in order to audit solo knots. Seriously, this is what's happening in the church.
As in the procedure you use to do knots, you do it in an antagonistic way, kind of like you do an objective auditing and you're asked to touch a table and it's been changed into a way that makes it like you force your hand on that table and then you don't get the benefit from that objective process. That sort of idea?
Well, yeah, it's a good example would be get behind me, Satan, and be gone.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I mean, because I've looked at, I gotta say, I totally agree with you, because I'm not even up to that, but I started looking into things, and I started looking at the way people were going about things, and I was thinking, hold on a second, I could see how this could be stuffed up. You know what I mean? Like, it did remind me a little bit of the valence of the valence that the church has taken up, which is like this David Miscavige's command intention, this like forceful OT thing. Just like, this is not going to happen now. Boom, boom, boom. And it's like, I don't know. It's just like, it's like a perversion of what I think LRH stood for, because I think LRH was like positive and was like, yeah, let's get this done and let's do that done and like upbeat, and like then it became a bit, like like forceful. And maybe LRH had that as a part of him. Maybe he did have that angry forceful as well. But like the church has run with like that bad side and taken it into all forms of policy and auditing and everything.
I would say that would be a safe statement. Antagonism is the social tone in the church. Now, there's social and there's chronic. The social tone is antagonism, maybe anger even,
Yes, it is. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and it's like, yeah, like if they're starting a business or anything, it's like, this blah, 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 and it's filtered all the way around to the church, and it's really perverted. And do you know something that's interesting? Scientology was pretty popular, I think, is like the church and outside the church in Taiwan. And the thing about them is that they don't have that ugly. They haven't got that ugly culture about them. They haven't got that ness about them. Like I just noticed that the soups were like more casual, and the people who were doing it, they didn't have this crazy Dave Miscavige valence.
right. Well, I don't disagree with you on that particular aspect. The like LRH says, there's only two things that can really go wrong in a session: TRs and metering. And I don't want to get off on a tangent. We pretty much covered the greatest hits on things that had been changed and everything like that. But if you look at that within that scope, the FN, the three swings FN thing, some of the small changes they've made to listing and nulling, that sort of thing. I mean, it all comes down to metering and TRs. So in the case of knots, and you're being antagonistic doing knots procedure, well, what do you got? You got out TRs, because in TRs would be, do birds fly? And the PC says whatever the PC says, and you go, thank you. If the PC doesn't answer it, you go, I'll repeat the auditing command. Do birds fly? It's not get behind me, Satan, and be gone, in an antagonistic fashion. And I'm not necessarily being literal, but that's the best way I can describe it. And you get down all the way to the bottom of the bridge, and you're dealing with I have a personal friend who has done 7 or 8 purifs in the church, and never reverted back to drugs. None of that. Maybe has a beer at night. That sort of.
Why?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, if you can't sell them a big package, sell them a little package. I mean, and I don't get off a tangent either as far as the money aspects of it. There's a bigger, broader picture on that. But I'm just saying, I mean, the changes have been going on since 1965 when LRH issued KSW number 1, because people were just taking license to do all kinds of things and doing quick grades and that sort of thing. But and there are a lot of people that really despise that particular reference. But you have to look at keeping Scientology working from the viewpoint of what works, and if it doesn't work, don't change it. There's no need to change it. And LRH talks about that in numerous briefing course lectures about the objectives and things like that, where people are just want to constantly change something. I mean, if you do, there's a drill you can do in Scientology where you're passing on. It's an admin drill, and you're trying to get one person to pass on information to another person, to pass on information to another person. And it's an admin TR. Get Bob to get Bill to get Jane to get Sue to get Bob to get Ted to get the product. Well, if you tell somebody, tell this person that the sky is blue because of the oxygenation in the atmosphere, for example, and you pass that down the line, and this is with Scientologists. This isn't even with non-Scientologists. By the time it gets to the end, it's going to be something different. And that's what keeping Scientology working number 1 was all about, was the fact that don't change a thing. It works fine. But this is what people do that have cases.
Yeah.
And this is what he was upset about. So anyway, not to beat a dead horse, but this is what happened. This is where we're at, is because people, like he says, if you don't get Scientology home to a person, they're not going to understand it, and they're going to squirrel. I hate to use the word squirrel, but they're going to change things up, and before you know it, it's not going to be the same thing. And that's what we've seen in the church. We see it in the field too, where people they want to be creative. They want to put their own create their own spin on it, and and this might, and that's fine. But the thing is that when things get screwed up, which inevitably they will, and you're trying to get somebody to help you with it because you're out of your league, and you're doing something where there isn't any reference to back up what it is that you did or how to handle it, you're in trouble.
Yep. And then there's the other way of going about it, where the attitude the church has is antagonistic, literal, 100% LRH, literal, which definitely comes from David Miscavige. His freaking idea that's like, you read a policy and you do that exactly to the T, which is just it's a characteristics of people who are below tone 2 on the tone scale. Because I was twinned up with someone who was literal in communication. I could see it, and it was incredible because it was so batshit crazy. It was just like I could see how it was just ruining the person with like this crazy, like this tunnel vision, like, I read the auditing command and I do it exactly as it says on the sheet without any change. And so they don't duplicate it. They don't actually understand it, make it their own and deliver it to the PC. And the PC just gets this hardcore, exact insaneness. Like, it's, I don't know. I think you understand what I mean, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you looked at it from the viewpoint from an auditor's viewpoint, the amount of case gain is proportionate to the degree of ARC in the session. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you should look at everything from an auditor viewpoint and everything you do in your life. But that particular datum does apply to everyday life and dealing with other people consistently.
Yeah, well, I mean, I noticed it when I was getting audited on, I think, like SOP 8C or something, and my twin who was real exact. And so he couldn't read the policy. He didn't read it, really understand it. He was like, it's like they're paranoid about doing any form of screwing. They don't understand it. Screwing is just like going in the auditor's chair and just making shit up. Like their idea of screwing is you like adding like one little alternative word into it. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're just too robotic and nutsy or whatever. And so I was getting audited by a guy, and so like, because LRH, he wrote down how to do the process or whatever, and that's like, he doesn't write it exactly how to do it, because he assumes that the person's going to read it, understand it, and be a smart auditor and then apply it. But if you're dumb and you're literal, you read it and you're like, shit, I have to do it exactly as it says, and you're like confined and you're confused by it. You know what I mean? So I experienced it from an auditor, and it was just stupid. And so this is why when someone like Chris Shelton had a bad experience with the tech in the church, it's just like there was all this shit going on, and it's very complex, and it's just like, yeah, I can see how no one can get wins from it, because it's something that you can really mess up and screw up, and someone can screw up how to do knots and be on it for 7 years if they're doing it in a retarded way. Like, it's just, you've got to apply common sense. And I'm not saying screweling, I'm just saying common sense. There's a big difference. Where there's other people, these little mini David Miscaviges that are running around the church are like, there's no common sense, there's no being reasonable, we do exactly 100 per LRH tech. And it's just ridiculous. And anyway, that's referring to the tech side of the church. There's a whole other side of the church, which is the policy side. So like the policy side have been screwed, and like the regging, like the hardcore regging which sends everyone PTS. So you've got the tech that's actually been, the Scientology tech that's actually been messed up, and then you've got all the policy and shit that's been messed up, and everyone's PTS, and those two things combined to guarantee that like people might not get any wins from it. You know what I mean? That's why people don't. Like, I still could get some, but like it really guarantees it. And also, and because, sorry, I'm just going on about this thing, because Chris Shelton will go,
no, it's fine.
Chris Shelton will go, well, LRH made that bad strict policy and stuff, and it's just like, you don't know what was going on with the governments and all this corrupt shit that was going on in the world, and LRH had to make a strict group with all these rules and these sec checks and all this sort of shit, because literally there was like a COINTEL program going on, like with FBI, CIA and shit, IRS trying to shut down the church and infiltrate it and take it over. Like, go to the Wikipedia page and just look up COINTELPRO, and it talks about how the FBI were like invading the Black Panther movement and going into, and Scientology was one of these movements. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they were going in, doing all this dodgy shit, invading them and stuff, breaking the law. It's totally corrupt the government. It's outrageous. And it's just like, this is why the church went off the rails, because the government had a big part to do with contributing to it and messing it up.
Sure. That's all accurate information.
Yeah.
there were about 7 different things I was going to say in there, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, because
um,
it's just wild. Because I mean, this is anyway. It's a complex thing. All these things sort of happened, and it's gone downhill in the church and all that sort of
yeah,
stuff. But
yeah,
this is what happens. Just go out there and try and start up a big movement and see if it gets infiltrated. Apparently, and also you hear as well. Captain Bill say something like, he will say something like, "Oh, Scientologists were getting were getting picked on in their tax, like Scientologists individually were getting tax audited and stuff." And you're like,
right.
oh, that's an outrageous conspiracy theory. They'll have a special file for people who are Scientologists and pick on them in the IRS or whatever. And then you hear about Alex Jones saying that how there were like right-winger conservative people, like Tea Party members or whatever, and they were getting targeted for like tax audits by the IRS. And you're just like, yeah, the world really is epically corrupt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to get off on a tangent and go down
Yeah.
the rabbit hole on conspiracy theories with you, because I could do that very easily, and I don't
Yeah.
disagree with you on anything that you said. With that in mind, um, I haven't listened to much of what Chris Shelton has said, but you've been using him as an example. This all comes down to really simple concepts, and I've met auditors in the field and things like that. They tend to shy away from this particular reference. There's an HCOB called Anatomy of an Overt. And this HCOB basically takes the auditor perspective as far as dissecting what it is that causes a person to commit an overt. And basically what it says, and it's pretty simple, is that there's a misunderstood word, concept, or symbol that the person has, and then they start to individuate. Does that sound familiar? It's basically study tech, okay? But this is what happens to people. Now, the difference is, and this is something that a lot of auditors don't get. They don't. It's just that they don't know to apply this. But did you know that a person at, let's just say strong interest, is going to have a completely different manifestation of an overt and a missed withhold than a person who's at 2.0 or below 2.0. Did you know that?
So you're saying that if someone commits an overt and they're below tone 2, the things that will come after that are different if someone's at strong interest?
Yeah. Yeah, you're going to have a totally different.
Well, I was thinking of the example when you got DBs and like criminals who just will go and like just commit crimes and stuff, and they're at such a low level of awareness. It's just a part of their life, and it I'm sure like one little overt affects them, but like if you got someone who's ethical at like higher on the tone scale.
Honestly, it's actually the other way around. It's actually the other way around, because somebody who is low toned isn't necessarily going to do themselves in because all beings are basically good, because they're going to, it's sort of a cleared cannibal is a cleared cannibal. Well, I'm not saying that they're clear, but I'm saying that they don't know any better because they don't have any data. And it's going to take a lot longer for them to, quote unquote, pull something in or put their ethics in, because they're down in the muck. But as far as the way people behave, you can see how people behave a lot better when, like we're talking about, and this is no slight to Chris Shelton if he listens to this podcast, because I haven't heard his communication in a long time. I barely remember any of it at all. So I don't know what's going on in his universe, and I'm not trying to indicate anything to him personally. But when you see somebody who is attack, and they're going after the church, and they're not making any distinctions between the church and Scientology, the subject at large, you know what you're dealing with as far as what the tone level is and everything like that. Where if somebody is higher tone, they're gonna go, okay, so what are the facts? What are we looking at here? And if they left the church and they were disgruntled with it and everything, you probably wouldn't hear anything from them ever again, and they would just go off and do something else and be creative and live their life and be happy and just know that that was a bad scene. But we're not seeing that with somebody like Leah Remini, for example, or any number, Tony Ortega, or Rinder, or Marty Rathbun. It's a totally different situation because you're dealing with a totally different tone level, and that's why. And this is the distinction I'm trying to make to cut to the chase. When you see people that do this sort of a thing, I'm not trying to vilify any of the people that I just mentioned, but when you see them doing the things that they're doing, and you understand the tone scale and the chart of human evaluation, they're a known quantity, and that is a quantity that you don't want to have anything to do with because they're being a victim.
Yeah.
They're not taking any responsibility for the things that have happened to them.
Yeah.
Because like Ellerate says,
yeah.
and I know a lot of people, even in the field, there's only two things that you can be guilty of: being there and communicating. And I don't give a shit what anybody says. If you can pony up to that and you can confront that, you've got the world in your hand. And if you can't, you're going to be miserable and you're going to be unhappy, because to the degree that you're happy is to the degree that your ethics are in.
Yeah.
And I'm not being a hardcore Scientologist. I'm just saying these are facts, period.
So they're going to take responsibility for, exactly. It's like, I guess it's kind of like you got sold a crappy car and you got ripped off, and it's hard to confront that you got ripped off. So you're just like, nah, the car was great. There was nothing wrong with it. Nah. Because you're like, you can't confront that you stuffed up or whatever, and you weren't smart enough when you were dealing with that salesman. Hey, here's a quote that you said. It's about that topic. It said, this is from your Facebook post. What Leah Remini and Mike Rinder don't tell people is that the unaltered Scientology is drastically different from what Leah, her mother, and Rinder got in the church when compared to the original, real, unaltered Scientology available in the field, or that her father is one of us as an independent in the field. They don't want to make the distinction that there is a real Scientology, only the COS's altered version, misdirecting the public by omission of information, which isn't a reality show based on reality then, is it? It is misdirection for a purpose not disclosed by the creators and producers. Good news and reality TV don't sell ads.
Yeah, I stand by that statement.
Yeah, I found
because it isn't reality.
Yeah, I found it really funny when she had an indie auditor on, and she didn't really ask them anything to do with independent Scientology, or all she did was ask them about like what they thought was wrong with the church or something, and of course they said, oh well, this is bad. So then someone at home sitting there thinking Scientology is so bad, like it's messing with. I think the reason why I get angry about these sorts of things is because I can see instances of low-tone people messing with people's minds, confusing them and making them dumb and making their lives crapper, and I don't like that.
Yeah, well, reality TV in general, panders to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
Whether it's, sitcoms or reality shows or, God forbid, the news, because there's only 5 corporations in the world that run all of the news outlets planet-wide, and we could go even further down the rabbit hole and end up in some really strange territory, but we'll save that for a later conversation. With that in mind, like Ellerate said, you're looking at merchants of chaos, and bad news sells newspapers. And unfortunately, Leah Remini is a bit of a lapdog to the producers and the almighty dollar, and she's sold out to being a victim, because being a victim sells a lot more ads than telling people the truth. That's basically what I was trying to say with that post. I think she has got one hell of a pair of cojones on her, and she is a worthy adversary for anybody that crosses her path. But the thing is, and this is what it all comes down to, is she doesn't know what she doesn't know.
Yes.
She was born in Scientology after things had already changed. She's part of the alteration generation, and she doesn't know that she doesn't know, which is unconscious incompetence that Scientology really works, because all she's ever seen is the dwindling spiral that had already started in its spiral when she jumped on board as a kid with her mom and was in the ESO, and things had already gone horribly wrong by that point.
Yeah.
So of course she's going to feel bad about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's an example, like the mainstream television, they love to put up someone as a news anchor or Leah or these people as these hosts who just do not know what's going on. They just do what they're told and they say what they're told. Like they say whatever the script says and all that sort of stuff. Like they don't know what they're talking about. Really, they seriously don't. And
Right.
And because if you actually had someone who really knew what they were talking about, they would say some outrageous stuff and just get taken off TV and cancelled because they're controlled by the corporations and stuff. You can't get away with talking about the truth, you know. You offend the advertisers and all this sort of stuff on the shows.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so Leah, she knows. I mean, obviously she knows about the Church of Scientology, so she's talking about something she knows about, but she's only talking about the church, and she's not that bright. I'm going to say it. I personally think she's not that bright, because I think a bright person who's actually smart would stop, assess the area, really look into the information, and then make a TV show about Scientology.
Well, I've never. I'll be fair. I'm not going to argue with that statement. I've never met her. I have my own conceptions of her behavior and things like that. But I'll be fair and say just that. I've never met her. But that being said, the distinction is not being made that there, and I know for a fact that she knows that Scientology is being done out in the field. Her stepdad is doing Scientology out in the field to this day.
Yeah.
And I know auditors that he's visited. And I'm not trying to out him or anything like that. She knows this is going on, but yet she abstains from saying anything about it on her show, which tells me volumes about what's going on behind the scenes on this whole thing.
Yes, and hold on, can I quickly say something as well? I'm not necessarily saying that she's not bright, but I am saying, because she's obviously successful and all that sort of stuff, but I guess, like that thing you're saying where they're below tone too, where they've got so much anger and case and all this sort of shit that it stops them from being able to see reality, and they just got anger, so she's just venting on the church the whole time.
Yeah, well, I mean, she's in, and if she ever listens to this show, or somebody that knows her listens to this show, she's in the valence of a Northeastern woman. And I'm not saying anything about sexes. I'm just saying she's in the valence of a Northeastern woman and man. They're both the same valence, which is this: are you talking to me? Are you talking to me? Because I'm talking to you. You know, it's that sort of antagonistic. You don't want to fuck with me because I'm going to fuck with you back.
But that's kind of like David Miscavige's valence as well, isn't it?
Well, we can go into that, and I can tell you exactly the valence that David Miscavige is in, because I was told that by Marty Rathbun.
Oh my God! Hold on a second. All right, I'll note that down. But I want to finish what we were talking about. Keep on saying. I'll get to you at that.
Okay. So, you know, a valence is a package that somebody uses of mannerisms, forms of communication, service facsimiles, on and on and on, all of the litany of things in Scientology that they use in order to get through life. And you see these particular valences here in Minnesota. There's a particular valence, which is a valence of cold indifference and mistrust. And it comes from this Northern European blend of people and everything like that. And they're very, very critical and harsh to people. And I'm not saying all of them. I'm just saying when you see the valence. Well, Leah is in this Northeastern New York, New Jersey valence that she's found to be successful. I don't know if her mother is. The only person that I know would be Dexter Gelfand, who actually knew them when she was a kid. But, you know, it's still obvious that she's behaving like a Northeastern valence, and it's very antagonistic, and you don't want to mess with me, and I'll fight you, and, you know, come on. I mean,
Yeah,
that's where she's at.
yeah, yeah. And with the show, I mean, I think that it's like, when it's like the tabloid magazines, if you put a magazine article, I had an interesting auditing win, and like on the beauty mag or whatever, it's not really going to sell. But if you had, I got raped by a cult, it's like, oh, shock, must buy, must read or whatever. So it's kind of like with the whole aftermath show or whatever. It's like it's gone with that whole thing of like of the badness of Scientology and the shockness of it, and that's what sells it. So all the people involved are just like focusing on the badness and the shockingness, and because it's just like, yeah, and the people like housewives will watch and go, oh my god, this is outrageous, these poor victims or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, then the reason for that is the reactive mind. It's the OT2 area, the dealing with implants and things like that, and these dichotomies that are twisted around and things like that. And that's how it is, where it's literally an inverted dichotomy. But I don't want to get too close into that. But that's why these things work, is because negative is positive and positive is negative. That's as close
Hold
as
on a
I can get.
second. I wouldn't mind getting into that. That's pretty interesting.
Well, all of that data is pretty much on the briefing course as to what LRH talks about on that. But that's the long and the short of it is, if you look at this planet and you said that negative was positive and positive was negative, then you'd have planet Earth.
Yeah,
Straight up.
everything's inverted.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And you telling your girlfriend I love you, and she's like, I can't believe you said that. I mean, it just, and I'm not saying that has anything to do with women. I'm just saying that it's that sort of an inverted dichotomy where love is hate and hate is love and all that stuff. Now it's just obvious
Well,
that
I
these
know.
things are going on.
Well, I noticed with 1-1s, because they seem to invert everything. They would have like their idea of friendship or relationship or whatever. I would be viewing as like, wow, like they're making hostility and badness like a good thing, and they're embracing each other and they're enjoying like this messed up relationship of bad qualities. And it would be kind of interesting to look at, because it's interesting how they've inverted love to make it this weird, perverted, dirty thing.
Yeah.
And they're getting along with it, and they're living a life with it, and it's like, whoa, that's a twisted creation.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all the reactive mind, and what it's made up of, and the whole track, these implants and all that stuff. That's what it is. I mean, there's just no way to get around it. So the best thing to do is surround yourself with people who are much higher on the tone scale. And if somebody's dragging you down, because the higher tone selectively gives, I don't know if you've heard that before or not, but it's an LRH datum that if you're in a relationship with somebody and they're higher toned than you, then you're going to be dragging them down the tone scale, and that's why you end up in a divorce or the relationship goes on the rocks. Or vice versa, you're higher toned than them, you're going to selectively give up your tone level of strong interest to come down to their tone level of boredom or antagonism or anger or, being bodies, and all. I mean, you could go on and on with all of the different scenarios. But that's how this thing works. And see, this is the deal in this society. I'll be very brief on this because I can tell you want to say something.
By the way, I just want to let people know that's an example of OT phenomenon, because just in case someone's new to Scientology and that, this sort of shit does exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah,
like people,
so,
it's just like all these spiritual abilities really do exist. It's not common, and it's not easy to control and to sit in a room and say, hey, John Burke, do an OT phenomenon right now, right? Because this is what Chris Shelton would want you to do. He would say, you got to get in that room and experiment and prove it right there, right now, right?
Right. Well, let's keep that, put a pin in that, and we'll go over that a little later on as far as OT phenomena, tone level, tone scale, chart of human ability, and we'll cover that fully here in a little bit.
Yeah, well, what were you saying? Continue what you're saying.
I forgot. What were we
Okay,
talking
well,
about?
I'll say what I was going to say is that if people are thinking that it's a conspiracy theory, not just made up that John thinks that Leah's an angry woman or whatever, it's like no, I've been looking into it. It does seem like that behind the scenes she is a bit of an angry person, right? So
Well, she
like she
asks the
yells at
reporter what
people
he
and
thinks
stuff.
about something and tells the reporter to fuck off when he doesn't answer the way she wants it. I think that's it's kind of apparent and
Yeah,
manifest
and behind the
that
scenes,
this
so
is what's going on.
yeah, and behind the scenes, apparently sometimes she yells and that. Like, I don't think she's like some crazy, really anger toned 1.5, like really wild one. But she does seem to be in that thing of being low toned and that. And what's the deal though when? This is an interesting question. What's the deal when you get someone like LRH or Alex Jones, for example, who exhibit these uptone phenomenon, but then they get upset about things and then they come down, they start yelling and pounding at 1.5, right? These,
there's
what's
a big
that?
difference between yeah, and I get what you're saying, and I'm not taking you
Like, as in, like,
literally.
hold on a second, like, as in, like, for example, everyone, because people will be like, yeah, but if your child's misbehaving or something, you should get angry, so that's reasonable. So they'll be going, like, how can you be putting down anger toned? You know what I
Well,
mean?
okay, now I'm going to have to back it up a little bit. And this is another LRH datum that a person, it's an HCOB, it's a technical bulletin, where he basically says, and I'm paraphrasing, and I'm sorry for the verbal data, you hardcore techies out there. What happens with a person is, and I'll give you a strong example. And this is, you've seen this, you've done this, I've done this. You see a little kid, and the little kid goes, "Mommy, can I get some gum out of the gumball machine?" And they're standing in line at the grocery store, and he sees it out by the door. And mom says, "No, no, no, not right now, Jeremy. You don't need it. You're gonna have dinner, and you just don't need it." And so the kid goes, "Mommy, I want some gum. Will you get it for me?" Okay. And she said, "No, I told you no, don't get any gum. I'm not going to give you some money for gum." And then he just gets pissed off and then goes further down the tone scale and then eventually goes into, you know, apathy and all this stuff and gets on the floor and creates a scene and all this. Well, LRH describes this perfectly. And what it is, it's a very demonstrable, palpable phenomena that a person uses the tone scale to get a desired result. When they don't get the desired result, they'll dance down the tone scale or up. More likely, I'd have to say 9 times out of 10 they're going to go down and not go up unless they understand the datum. I'd have to say 9 times out of 10. But there's always those people that work in uptone ways on their own and aren't Scientologists, and they don't have to be Scientologists. But they tend to go down the tone scale in order to create an effect and get what they want. So they'll keep going down the tone scale until they reach a point of reality with a person, and then they get what they want. Leah Remini is matching the tone level of her viewers, and that is why she's as successful as she is. Period.
Yes, but how does that answer though this idea that like isn't I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, am I wrong for getting angry?
Well, I'm not saying that there are situations where you shouldn't get angry, because sometimes you have to uh, you have to go up and down the tone scale in order to get something done, which brings us back to your original question about Alex Jones and LRH. Now, what I was going to say about that, and this will kill two birds with one stone as far as the questions. There is a big difference between LRH and Alex Jones, but it's not as wide as you might think, because if you painted it with the brush from the viewpoint of bypass charge, that is the commonality. Alex Jones had a lot of bypass charge the last time I watched the video with him. And LRH says the sum of the case is the total of its bypass charge. Now, That's Alex Jones. Now with LRH, the situation with LRH, and this is one of the points that we were going to cover tonight when you sent me the syllabus, was the difference with LRH was he was his own guinea pig for a lot of this stuff, especially the OT levels. And there's a great story by Otto Roos on Scientolopedia. I suggest everybody go read it to get a better understanding of what can happen to a person that is trying to develop a technology such as Scientology. LRH had all kinds of outlists. He had all kinds of bypass charge on things. LRH preferred to have auditors that he could control in session, which violates the definition of in sessionist, which is willing to talk to the auditor and interested in own case. Now, that's a stunning revelation, but it's a fact. It's the truth. This is what happened. I've talked to several people that were extremely close to him, and these are the things that happened. So when LRH got pissed off and banged his arm on the desk on OT3, he was sitting in the middle of OT3 with this OT3 case trying to plot this out for the rest of us and busted his arm, banging it on the desk on the ship. I don't know if you've heard that story or not, but that's the bypass charge, which is worse than anything Alex Jones has done as a parallel. But they both have bypass charge, and sometimes they let it get the better of them. And I don't know how much of what Alex Jones says is true. I can neither confirm or deny a lot of the things that he says. I don't disagree with him on some things, but I don't agree with him on all of them. I don't agree with LRH on some things, but I agree with him a lot more than I do dissent.
No, but what I'm trying to say is that when LRH was yelling at people on the ship, when I yell on a video or something, when Alex Jones yells about something like that, what's the difference between that anger and then Leah Remini's anger? Because in my opinion, it seems like these when people are stuck in a certain tone level, that's when it's wrong. And also when it's an irrational anger, like when it's I feel like there's a difference. Like when someone's up at more tone 4, then they can come down when something outrageous happens and get angry, and then they can go out of that. And also they're actually targeting the right why. They're getting angry for a right reason. Whereas other people will get angry because they're like, when they're below tone 2, they're stuck in anger all the time. And also it's an insane anger. Like they're literally almost insane. Like they're not angry at a reasonable thing.
Right. Well, the thing is, a lot of that type of anger is caused by outlists from listing and nulling. I'm sure Leah has an awful lot of outlists from being in the church. And Leah, if you're listening, Trey Lotz, or any of the other class auditors in the field would be happy to help you with your outlists in session and clean you up and do a repair list on being in the church, because one does exist. And we can help you with that.
And also, but I think people who are leaving the church, even if they don't ever want to do Scientology again, I think it would be good to get handled on that, like get over that issue and everything, and then you know what I mean?
It's an incomplete cycle. Any incomplete cycle is going to hang you up, and you're going to have attention units that stick you on it. And that's a huge incomplete cycle because there's betrayals involved. I'm sure she feels betrayed. Alex Jones obviously feels betrayed on a lot of things. But I don't see him presenting a lot of solutions, because solutions don't buy advertising. That's something I see with Alex Jones. He makes what's his name? What's the other guy who's a Scientologist and has his own radio show out of Florida? He's a conservative.
Oh, yes, Grant Cardone.
No. He's another one. Not Otto. I can't think of his name. I can't think of his name, but you might not know him because you're not here in the U.S., but he's a Scientologist, and he's had drug problems in the past, and it's a little known fact that he's a Scientologist, and I'll think of his name here in a few minutes. But and he's angry too, and I'm just telling you, when you see this sort of thing and you're an auditor, and this is why it is so important to get trained and get trained well, because you see things other people would not see. It is like through the looking glass, and you understand the motivations of people. And I'm not saying that you're always right and they're always wrong. There is no right and wrong in that sort of a thing when you're seeing things for what they are.
Yeah, but
That's a good
John,
thing.
what if your kid did something to annoy you? Like, as in, are you saying that it's wrong to get angry?
No, I'm not saying it's wrong to get angry, and I would be the last one to say that I haven't gotten angry at my kids. I mean, that's a fact. I have. And not that it's okay. I mean, you could be completely 40.0 with your kids and everything like that, but I will tell you this, that a lot of Scientologists who sit there and say, well, I'm going to grant my kids beingness, and I'm not going to say no to them, and I'm going to just let them be the Thetan that they can be, they end up being twats.
Like spoiled little brats.
Yes, they end up being little spoiled twats, and they're the worst thing to be around, and they end up being druggies and things like that. I mean, I could tell you stories for hours on that sort of a thing, because they're not learning to be a part of the group or society. They're just being spoiled rotten instead of being productive, contributing to the group, that sort of a thing.
Now, hold on. There's so much to, sorry, I got to say this. This is a big one.
That's okay.
But see, this is another example of someone they take an LRH idea and they just don't apply it right. Like, for example, when you say grant a kid beingness, it means when your kid says that he wants to be a singer, don't say to him, look, you're just really shit and you can never make it a success in life. And or like like seriously, because this is what low tone parents do. I know because I've got them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you're growing up as a kid, and they crush your spirit and your soul because they say you can't do that, or you can't. No, that's not possible. And they just and they destroy the being. You know what I mean? But then people take that to the extreme, and I imagine they let their kid run wild and just do outrageous behavior.
Well, you know, there's a happy medium, and you have to get them to contribute, and you have to make sure that they're, you know, being a worthwhile part of the group. And I hate to use the exchange word because a lot of times, a lot of Scientologists, especially in the last decades, the Miscavige decades, they really beat that to death, the exchange thing, which is another issue that we could spend a whole show on that. But kids do need to contribute to the group and have chores and you know, add some theta to the group, because if you don't put a create on something, it's not going to be there. That's part of the axioms. If you clean your car, you'll find that your car generally starts to run a little bit better, and problems you've had with it tend to go away, at least for a while, because you're putting a create on it just by cleaning your car or fixing something on it that might not be the major thing but might be a minor thing. But because theta is senior to mest, and the thing is that we are all thetans pushing around bodies, basically dolls, meat dolls, in the physical universe, which is a lie in itself because it persists. So you have to really pump the kid full of theta, and you have to validate them. You have to, you know, bring them up the way you would want to be brought up. And unfortunately, a lot of Scientologists don't do that because, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and I'm gonna commit heresy, but I've seen an awful lot of Scientologists in and outside of the church who have a misunderstanding on what Scientology is. It isn't I, me, mine.
What?
It is we, us, they. Because they operate on the first dynamic. Scientologists, as a general rule, are really selfish. Because it's I want to get up the bridge. You know, they always talk in the first person. I want to do this. I want to get up the bridge.
Like it's very self-determined. Like, but manically.
So.
Yeah.
And that's not what it is. And when you talk to auditors look at it from the viewpoint of we, us, they. I don't know if you've ever noticed that.
Yeah.
A good audit.
Yeah.
And that's the viewpoint. That's LRH's viewpoint. And that's the viewpoint that a parent should have with a kid. But you don't really see that often, because unless they're really good parents and you win the lottery on the two parents you pick when you jump into the body, and they're both, really high toned parents, and it's not very common. So you tend to pick the weaker valence of the parents that you have because it gets the most attention, and down the slippery slope you go.
Yeah. What were you gonna say about DM's valence?
Yeah, when I spoke, both my wife Carrie and I went to see Marty in 2010 down in at his house that he had on the water. I forget, it was the town that got a direct hit from the hurricane. And I don't even know if that house is still standing now, but they live in the area again. I've heard they moved from the house that they had back out in the country to back to this area, Ingleside. That's what it is. Anyway, we went to Ingleside, and Marty was telling me. He said, and this is quote. He said, "Do you know who DM's valence? What his valence is? Whose valence he's in?" I said, "No. Why don't you enlighten me?" And he said, the person that he wants to be the most like, it's a fictitious character. It's from a movie, and it's Don Corleone. Marlon Brando's character in The Godfather. I kid you not. This is what he told me. He said he idolizes that character, that valence. And I said, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
yeah, because it's a mafia sort of thing, and that's what connects for him. He's like, it's the thug sort of thing. The word thug comes from East India, thuggy, and it's been around for a long time. But I mean, that's basically what these mafioso types are. Is they're in this force valence, which is what we were talking about earlier, is this forcing to do things. And LRH could get people to do things really, really well by communicating with him. Not that he always did, but he usually did, and he would get things across. He wasn't an angry person normally. He had a lot of bypass charge, and the thing is he wouldn't let people take care of him because he was a little distrusting, especially after he got kicked out of the UK, like you were talking about earlier, and they were forced to go out on the sea because he couldn't come back to the US. He couldn't go home to St. Hill, and he was basically outcast from the two countries that he liked the most. That's going to piss anybody off. I don't care who you are. And the guy had more confront than anyone I have ever seen, this lifetime or last. And I was around him last lifetime, and he could be a big pain in the ass, and he could be really angry sometimes, but he could also be the best friend you would ever have, and for mankind. I don't disagree with that statement. He was mankind's best friend, but on this planet, anybody that has a solution to entrapment is going to be attacked, and that's that we know now that's what happened.
Yeah, I think with the anger thing, it's kind of tricky. I think it's if you're not stuck in it, and you can move in and out of it, and you can use it in a rational way. And because I'm just thinking about like Alex Jones, for example, when he would get angry about something. I mean, that sells. Like that he's more entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's
well,
fun.
he even
Like I
admitted.
like it. I mean, I like it. I like the idea of turning on a video and having him just going absolutely wild. I reckon it's great.
Yeah, because everybody loves a train wreck on planet Earth. I mean, he admitted that in his child custody a couple months ago that it was an act. This is in court record that his upsettedness was an act. So I don't know what else to say about that, but that doesn't surprise me. It sells advertising, and he puts advertising for things on his show, and that's the unfortunate nature of planet Earth. And then you get into the Markabian aspect of it, and money, which enters in an altruist and causes everybody to take money from others in order to survive. And then you've got the overt cycle within that. And then, and that's what capitalism is all about: steal from thy neighbor.
Whoa.
So,
Well, yeah, but I think So I think the difference between Chris Shelton's anger and Chris Shelton's hidden anger and Leah Remini's open anger is that it's like they're stuck in it, and it's I don't know. It's not an uptone anger. I think you can have an uptone anger, as interesting as that sounds.
yeah, you're trying to get a product or something like that, and somebody isn't getting it done, and you just kind of throw out tone 40, which is the intention for them to get it done. And then you come out of it and you pat them on the shoulder after they got it done. You say, I knew you could. I just really needed you to get that done, sort of a thing. But, I don't agree with the fact that you have to be angry to get somebody to do something. I really don't.
Yeah.
And I really would like to see that fade away on this planet, if at all possible. And for, treat others the way you want to be treated. Be, do, have. Be the person you want to be, and behave as the person you would want to be treating you that same way. So, and OT has a lot to do with that. You don't have all the noise in the background and all the valences and stuff like that going on, and it's much smoother. So you can actually see something, and if you do get upset, you're not upset for long. That's one of the things I like about the OT levels, is it doesn't linger like it used to before doing the OT levels.
Yeah, and is it like just a parking ticket, for example? Like sometimes, you can just ruin your day, but I guess OT was just like, yeah, whatever, parking ticket. Or is upset for just half an hour?
I don't even know if it would be that. It might be, a couple of minutes. It's like, well, I parked there. Okay, so I was being there, and I was communicating by being there and leaving the car there longer than it should have been. I mean, that's the viewpoint that one should have. But I'm trained. I can't speak for an OT that's not trained.
Yeah,
I only know. I only know what I know, but the thing is that that's the distinction that needs to be made with a lot of OTs. I would have to say that at least 80% of the OTs out there that are, I'm going to go to the extreme and say bitching and complaining instead of whining and complaining about everything that Scientology did wrong to them. They're not tech trained. Yeah. And like LRH says, what do you call a Thetan who's not trained but's OT? Well, they're a big dumb Thetan. And that's really the fact. And Leah Remini, she knows how to operate a meter. She's at least done the solo course, but yet has the audacity to say on national TV that the meter is a lie detector. That just blows my mind. And you know what it tells me? It says she's got MUs, or she's just
sold out,
lying, and she knows it.
Oh, yeah, she's sold out. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what do you do? I mean, there's nothing you can do except make the distinction that she's not making. And I hate to go back to that, but that's just an example.
When you become a public person, you become like a product, like the Big Mac burger, you know what I mean? So she is, the Scientology hater. This is her product. And so that's why if she even does have an indie on her show, they only would talk for 2 minutes about the badness inside the church. You know what I mean? There's not going to be, she set herself up as being a certain character or whatever. And this is what people as well don't realize about LRH as the person, is that he also was setting himself up as a brand, as LRH. It was like this character and this valence, and it was actually, there's a copyright for that name and everything. And like, that's why some people will be like, well, I don't know. I don't think some people understand that point of view, that he was assuming a beingness in order to achieve something,
Yeah, well, and that's why he said what he said, that there were, contributions to the technology and keeping Scientology working. And, there weren't many, but there were some. Well, we know for a fact that there were a lot of people that wrote things for him, and he signed off on them. And, maybe they were based off of his technology, but there were things like conditioned by dynamics and exchanged by dynamics, which are tremendous tremendous actions for anybody that is having trouble in life. LRH did not develop those. Candy Swanson did, and he signed off on them and put his name on it, and she was cool enough to go, hey, yeah, no problem. Whatever you say, boss.
Yeah, because this brand, it was getting contributed to the brand of LRH. You know what I mean? And it's just like, that's why I mean, he was setting up this character. I think you notice it when you study comedians, right? And you can come across how they're almost like a fake person because they're setting up this character of them. He was doing that, but he was like this religious character or whatever and setting it up. But I mean, I shouldn't have listened to a Chris Shelton thing before interviewing you, but I'll just bring up an example, a perfect example of how he's illogical, because I want people to know this, because it's just like, this is what happens with 1-1s and stuff, and when they become below tone 2, they're just illogical in their thinking. So he was criticizing LRH for claiming LRH would say that he invented everything, and would deny that he'd taken bits and pieces from other things and stuff. And so he would say he was pointing out, like, Study Tech, for example. Apparently he reckons that Study Tech, LRH, like, took it from another lady, and he claimed that LRH invented it or something like that. And then he goes, but then it's just Chris Shelton. He goes, but then we all LRH did originate a lot of things on his own, like the overt and withhold phenomenon and disconnection. And I thought for a second, he didn't invent disconnection. Religious groups and Catholic Church have been doing disconnection forever. That's a completely illogical statement, Chris Shelton. You know, it's like, that's just illogical. It's just like, no. Like, as in, so you look at all these things, right, and you don't think, hold on, LRH, like, it's just ridiculous. LRH clearly got the idea of disconnection from other things, you know, like, it's just so he selectively picks and chooses. But that to me is a big flaw in thinking, that he would claim that, like, LRH originated off his own bat disconnection.
Right. Well, a bigger example of that would be the Greeks and the Romans. Okay, who gets more love historically? Who do you hear more about?
Greeks.
The Greeks.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, the Greeks as far as philosophical aspects go. But you hear more about the Romans because why? The Romans kicked ass and took names. But the thing is that the Romans pretty much took everything from the Greeks. Okay? They just did it better. So if you looked at Scientology and some of the things in Scientology is a composite, a concatenation of all of these ideas that he found, he came across, the Study Tech. I've heard, I haven't done the research on it. It wouldn't surprise me. But I think he expounded upon that, especially with the concept of metered word clearing, method 1, that sort of thing. I mean, they're just tremendously stunning, the changes that you can make with somebody in word clearing. You know, TRs, where did TRs come from? I've had people say, well, they look like a form of meditation. Well, no, they're not really a form of meditation. But everything is derivative. Everything is derivative.
Yes, exactly.
On this planet.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to say, and I agree completely.
And it's just like you're missing the whole, when people criticize him for that point. It's like you're missing the whole point of it. It doesn't matter where he necessarily got it from. It doesn't matter if he says that 12 bankers are ruling the planet. I mean, obviously he got that from bits and pieces of information and some intelligence agent, or he stole it because an intelligence agent told him it, or whatever. It's just like, it doesn't matter. What matters is the Study Tech, the ideas, and the fact that he has the guts to go and put it out there. That's what's important. That's why I respect the guy. I don't care. You could tell me. You could, and because Chris Shelton said this as well. Like, he said that someone, he was telling a sire that LRH stole the Study Tech or whatever, and the sire said, I don't care. And Chris Shelton was like, oh my God, that's such a big shock. And it's just like, no, it's not a big shock. Of course we don't give a shit. All I care about is learning about the Study Tech. That's what's important.
Right. Well, the thing is that also falls in line with the motivator. Are you familiar with what a motivator is as a definition?
Yeah.
A motivator is where somebody is looking for a reason to commit an overt. They're looking for a motivation.
Oh yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah, class. Yeah, it
you see,
is. Yeah.
yeah, and I can only take what you're telling me, but a lot of these guys that are knocking Scientology as a religious philosophy, they tend to expound upon things with motivators. Well, look at
Yeah.
this. Look what he did. This
Yeah.
quote he said about, if you want to make money, go start a religion.
Yeah.
He may have said that. He may have said that, and at the time, he may have even felt that.
Yeah, and also
But
they don't believe it when I say, "Hey, there's a dude that can exteriorize and go into another room and find shit out." They go, "Oh, that's just hearsay, someone telling a story." But they believe the other stories other people say.
That's
I was,
exactly
I
right.
was in a bad mood
That's
today,
exactly right.
but
Yep.
it's just I just hate the
Right.
cherry.
Right.
It's just sorry. I know that it's just these 1-1 tone levels. They're just like whoa. They are responsible for this earth and just the crazy condition because they just pervert everything and twist everything and they make it hard for the average Joe.
Well, I think you're giving them a little too much credit by saying 1-1. I hate to correct you. I think it's a lot lower than that personally.
You don't think
One
Chris
one.
is 1-1?
Oh, I don't know. I think he's probably lower than that. That's what I'm saying. Because the thing is, Scientologists, as a general rule, they tend to throw covert hostility around a little too generously, because a lot of people don't have and I'm not saying you're one of them, Andy. They don't have a really good understanding of the lower tone levels below that. I mean, it's, and you've got harmonics that are in these other tone levels. You can have somebody who's at controlling bodies, and then they have a harmonic of 1-1 or 1-5 or 2-1 or whatever.
Yeah, the harmonics can make it a
But
bit harder to spot.
yeah, because you don't really know what you're dealing with. Now, if I said to you, is Chris Shelton, is he 1-1 as a chronic or as a social? What would you say?
Well, I don't know him behind the scenes, so I can only go by the social, and it's socially 1-1.
Right. And I couldn't tell you myself because I don't recall what I saw. But just as an example, though, I mean, what you see socially and what's chronic, I mean, you can live with somebody for 5 years and then you, with any luck, would know what you're dealing with is a chronic tone level. But chronic tone levels are really hard to spot in any short period of time. So, you might, as an advice, you'd be better off to withhold judgment, because Scientologists tend to be really judgy. I don't know why that is, but they do. That's my opinion, and I'm being judgmental by saying that opinion, and I know it. I'm being cheeky, but the thing is the thing with Scientology is, for people who are listening that aren't Scientologists, Scientology is something that expands, and you expound upon that expansion, and it expands some more, and things that, and everybody's experienced this in their lives, where they saw something and they didn't realize they saw it, and then later on they realized that it was there. Well, multiply that times a millionfold, and that's what Scientology can do for somebody. There are things right in front of you that you think are a certain way, and they really are something completely different. Now, you don't necessarily need Scientology to do that, to get you to realize that. Sometimes just being on a bad plane flight and dropping a couple 100 feet and realizing you had your life go before your eyes can change your viewpoint on something too. But the thing is that Scientology and what it can contribute to a person's life is to the degree that they can be honest with themselves, they can apply the technology and get out of their own way. If they can't get out of their own way, they're not going to make it. And that's the Chris Sheltons and the Leah Raminis.
Just to finish up something about the DM valence, to close that off. So did DM actually say? Did he actually say that he is the like?
Yeah, I actually
like loves his
told
dope?
Marty this. Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
yeah, okay,
He
cool. Just want
actually
to clear
he
that up.
actually
Yeah.
he actually had Marty and a bunch of the upper echelon guys watch the Godfather films. And I believe he told me, I believe Marty told me several times, sort of like Chinese school type stuff. You would sit there, keeping Scientology working, doing we used to Chinese keeping Scientology working in flags. So, doing that sort of thing. And, you can implant anybody by repeating something long enough. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how the Germans used it. That's what I believe it was Goebbels that said that, if you lie often enough to people, they'll believe it.
Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
you're dealing with thugs, you're dealing with mafioso behavior from Miscavige and anybody that's gone PTS to him. And Marty did not fall far from that tree. I asked Marty in that same visit. I actually went down there to get some auditing from him, which, in retrospect was a bad idea. And I've since gotten corrected on it. Thank you, Trey Lots. And I asked Marty out on his dock, and my wife Carrie was sitting there, and I asked him. I said, true or false? Miscavige owns all the rights to the tapes and books. And Marty got within an inch and a half of my face and screamed at me for at least a minute and a half with spittle getting on my face, and then went over and sat down in his lawn chair. And Carrie, my wife, asked him a question to kind of divert him off of it. And he said, see, you should be asking intelligent questions like Carrie does. And that was when I realized that he was still in DM's valence. And this was in February of 2010.
It's like a mafia took over Scientology.
Yeah, well, that's basically what's happened. Is, I mean, you look at the planet and everything. It's being run. It's a little bit like a Douglas Adams book. I don't know if you've read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He actually called the Tampa org one time and wanted information on Scientology. A friend of mine was the one that answered the phone. I guess he lived in Tampa before he died. But anyway, it's almost so ridiculous it's funny.
Yeah,
the Douglas Adams books are like that, and how
that's like
how
Mission
could-
Earth.
and-
That's Mission Earth. It shows
yeah,
how ridiculous it is, and that's why I love it so much because it's so funny and it's so true.
Yeah, and these are the things these are the viewpoints that you get, and you get above it and you look at it, and you, as an OT, and you understand this stuff, and it doesn't bother you as much, and you just kind of go, yeah, there it is, and that's it, and yeah, as is it, and you move on, and you just go around it. Whereas before, the rock would have rolled right over you, and you would have had a horrible 3 weeks, and you would have been all keyed in and sad and all this jazz. And OT is OT. Things don't bother you like they used to. It's a much more placid surface on the lake.
And also, is it that you're sort of not controlled by your mind, like as in, you know what I mean? Like you're there and you're an observer, as opposed to just dramatizing an engram.
Yeah, well, you don't. I mean, if you look up the definition of clear, you don't have a reactive mind anymore. But there's more to it than that. That's what you find out on the OT levels, and I'm not gonna give away any spoilers or anything like that. But LRH talks about that there are other reactive minds on the briefing course, and that's a fact. He says this, and it's not confidential data, anyone. So don't get your panties in a bunch. But that's the deal. There are other reactive minds that you have to deal with. That's all I can say about that.
Well, it probably sounds
But that's
like
what
the
you're
history.
handling.
It sounds like you're talking about the history of man, where it talks about entities and stuff. But what was I going to say? Marty Rathman. Tell me what I think that he has been paid by the OSA to come out and attack the Scientology haters, which I kind of like, to be honest. What do you think? What do you think's going on with him?
Well, I mean, I can only guess, but it was obvious to me and my wife that he's done a complete 180, and now he's being sued by his former attorneys, who were actually hired on a contingency basis. So they didn't make any money off of that, and then he or she let them go. and they've moved back to Ingleside after living out in the country, and all things point to the fact that the check cleared. That's my opinion. And
What do you mean? You're
his
not giving
opinion,
me enough details. I'm not understanding it. Why was his lawyers suing him?
his former lawyers are suing his wife, and I'm not sure if they're suing him because she's the one that hired him. They were hired on a contingency basis, which means they don't see any money if his wife didn't see any money in the lawsuit against the church. So what she did, is at some point in the past here, when they were doing this lawsuit against the church and trying to get Miscavige to be deposed, excuse me. I wish disposed was what I meant. Little pun there. They let their lawyers go all of a sudden before the court case came to fruition, which was really strange. And then they moved back to Ingleside, which is where they had all of the trouble to begin with the squirrel busters and all this jazz. And the city didn't like them being there because there were so many problems and all of this stuff. So there's all these indicators that they came to a settlement with the church, and they didn't want to share the money with their attorneys who were on contingency basis. So they let their attorneys go. Then they settled with the church. And so now the attorneys have taken them to task and are trying to get their bank records subpoenaed so that they can prove that they were paid off by the church.
And it's just funny, these
I'd
games.
Have to say, I think that's happened.
Yeah, these games that lawyers play and that sort of stuff, like, you're just like, instead of just going out and actually making a product and contributing to the world, it's just like these little silly games of like, oh, sue you, and oh my god, that person fell over and hurt his knee at work, and oh, there wasn't yellow paint on the ground, and oh, like.
Well, I don't disagree with you on that, but the fact of the matter is that I'm sure that they spent hundreds of hours representing them and having to take the church's attorneys to task, which is no small feat, especially when you're dealing with Monica Yingling, the Ice Queen of the Ages.
No way. No way.
You look it up on YouTube. And she's not a Scientologist either. If you had to deal with her, you'd have to ask a couple of guys to help you because she's a force majeure. So,
what do you mean the Ice Queen of the Ages? You're telling me she's a bit of a junkie or something?
No. I'm not saying she's a junkie. I'm just saying that she's a very cold personality.
She is. Yeah, she does seem like it.
Yeah. So she reminds me of Cersei Lannister. That sort of personality from Game of Thrones, But these attorneys, they didn't get anything. They did not get paid a dime from Marty and his wife, not one dime. Oh. And then they were let go before the court case came to fruition, and they could even get anything because they didn't want to pay their attorneys anything anyway. That's not okay. So, anyway.
So here's, I wanted to wrap up this thing about the OT8 that we were talking about. We didn't fully. I've got the quote that you said about OT8. I think this one. There have been at least 3. Wait, hold on. You were talking about knots being run incorrectly. But anyway, let's go on to this OT8 thing. There have been at least 3 versions of the level in the church because they don't have the original info for OT8 level and beyond. The COS recycles their OT8s to extract more money out of them and spin them in factually, sometimes busting them down the bridge all the way to the bottom to wash, rinse, repeat. This was and never has been Hubbard's wishes or policy ever, only the current leadership, which isn't just DM. So that's an interesting revelations, especially if someone's a part of the church. They'll be like, what the hell are you saying about OT8? Do they have the proper OT8 in the church?
No, they never did.
They've never had it.
No, if they had a quarter of it, I would be surprised.
Really? So So they didn't even get
Yeah.
like a small amount of it, and then because I heard this idea that they got a small amount of it, and then they were squirreling it and changing it and trying to spread it out to be like or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the data that I originally had back in 2005 from Pierre Ethier, who's a class 12 in Toronto, a very nice man, he told me at the time, he has since changed his opinion on this. He told me at the time that when all of the Snow White stuff was going down with,
The
well,
church.
they were trying to rip apart Mary Sue and LRH, and things got planted and blah 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 blah. And I don't care what anybody says about that whole situation. I think the whole thing was mocked up by the moles and the plants in the church
Yeah.
to get Mary Sue and
Yes.
LRH to divide and conquer.
Yes, exactly.
And
Because they needed to take the GO out, so they needed to go in there as agent provocateurs and just mess up
Right.
the GO. They were trying to like get people to
Right.
murder people and shit.
Right. So, with that in mind, what happened is Pierre told me at the time in 2005 that the OT8 materials that they did have got shredded in the destruction of all of the evidence that they thought should have been destroyed before the government could get a hold of it. He has since reneged on that. I don't know what data he's gotten to change that around because I haven't talked to him in years, but this is what he told me. So who told him that? I don't know. It's second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth hand information. But I do know that the original OT8 was killing people on it wholesale. There was a carload of Germans
Oh my
who
god! Come on!
ran into a brick wall. No, this is true story. Carload of Germans. They were all OT8s, and every single one of them died. Ran into a brick wall in a car in Germany. I mean, that's just one example. Many OT8s on the original OT8, shortly after its release, died in interesting ways or contracted cancer and then died.
Are you talking about when it was released in like 1989 on the ship or whatever, 88 on the ship?
Yeah.
You're talking about
Yeah,
that one?
the
Yeah,
original.
I heard that. So for 6 months they released it, and 6 months later they screwed it because they had to change it because it was just a train wreck.
Yeah, because it wasn't the real OT8. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So
I heard that.
I mean,
because
it's pretty.
because what it says is outrageous stuff on it. It's very interesting. I think you can find on the internet like the original OT8 that the church was releasing or whatever. And I can understand how you read it and you're like, it almost questions if you should be a Scientologist or not. And then you think about all the time and effort you put into it, and you're like, oh my god, like it's a real troll. It's like the ultimate troll or whatever. And you're like, whoa. And so I could see how people could actually be like, I spent thousands of dollars and I spent years and I've been supporting this, and this is what Scientology, the truth about it is. And I can understand how they could go PTS and crash cars and shit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is they had to mock something up. I mean, they've been dangling the carrot of OT 9 and 10 for decades, and I can't believe that anybody still believes that they actually have it, because they don't. They don't have any of it. So, it's just they gotta keep people on the comeback, and when they don't have it to give them, well, then they recycle them and say, well, you're not clear, and oh, by the way, you're going to have to start the bridge all the way from the bottom to the top again. But anyway, that's what's happening, because they don't have OT 9 and 10.
What are you willing to say about the original OT8 that the church released in '88? Not anything to do with the auditing, but the whole Jesus reference and Antichrist and stuff. What are you willing to say about that?
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't know that much about it. Whatever was put on there was an LRH. That I can say. The things that have come out in the media that they had on Leah Remini's show and all that stuff, it's a bunch of horse shit. It's not LRH. And I sent a tweet off to her about that, stating that that wasn't LRH. But see, the thing is there isn't any money in that either, saying that the church did it and LRH didn't. I mean, and they're throwing LRH under the bus. I hate to use that expression, but that's the way that it is. And anybody that has actually finished knots properly is going to know when they see the data that follows next. When you finish OT7, you know that there's more to do. That's the first thing you know. And anybody that tells you, well, I didn't get that, well, they didn't get the EP of OT7, because there is more case to handle. You're not done. And you probably never will be, because there's an awful lot of stuff to handle in the entire bridge. I don't know if you know this or not, and this is an interesting aspect all the way through OT7. The whole bridge approaches the case from the viewpoint of a victim. Did you know that?
Well, yeah, all before OT8, it's all you're all negative gain, so you're a victim.
Yeah, it's all negative gain, and see, that's why Dianetics worked in the first place. LRH found this out early on, because the undercut to any case is to approach them from the viewpoint of victim. So you have to look at it that OT8 would have to be something radically different from LRH. Now, we never got. I honestly don't think that he ever finished it. That's my opinion, of course. There may be other people out there that are just going, "Oh, horseshit! I was right next to him when
Oh, so you think he never finished OT8?
No, I don't think he did. I think he had glimpses of things that could be handled, but I know since then, like what Bill Robertson has done or did, as far as continuing on with some of that data. I'm not saying that it is the only solution. I'm not saying that Scientology has all the answers. I don't think that it does, but it's a pretty damn good start. So, I think there's a lot more that can be done. And LRH said, for God's sakes, build a better bridge. But most Scientologists feel that if you are trying to build a better bridge and look into these things and research it, I mean, Christ, LRH's intent for the Class 12s, and I believe this, was that a Class 12 auditor could rebuild the bridge, if need be, from the bottom to the top by memory alone. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, because you actually understand the tech. You actually get it, and you switched on, you worked it out. Hey, look, I've got to say something, because there's just so much I want to say.
Okay.
Well, in 77 or something, didn't he release something that was like tech fixing roundup? It was like it was like GAT. It was like GAT. It was like GAT0. You know what I mean? Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, and in that, didn't he say he'd almost fully done the upper levels? So do you think that maybe, and he just hadn't released them yet? So do you think maybe the upper levels got destroyed because he knew the church got taken over, or he gave them off to someone else or something?
Well, I could only hypothesize on that, to be fair. I guess, my viewpoint on it, and it might be a little bit of a cynical viewpoint, but I really kind of doubt that, because things went so far south so quickly. If you look at 1977 to 1986, within 9 years, LRH had dropped the body after that. And if you're using, LRH's tech is just as good on LRH as it is anybody else. And here's another heresy act on my part, but LRH was PTS. He was really PTS, and nobody was there to handle him anymore after they got rid of David Mayo, and he went the adverse effect of it. So I just have a hard time believing. I know the abilities that I've had and gotten from the OT levels, and I can't say how many of those abilities come from Excalibur or above, because I've done 3 things, including Excalibur, after finishing OT7. Uh, so I know that I have abilities and I can see things coming around the bend quite a ways. And there was a point when I was on Excalibur where I would actually get physically turbulated or feel a little ill when something was going to happen of a negative nature. It was almost like a glimpse of deja vu in a different way, sort of like a tremor, if you would, in the theta universe. And I would get really kind of riled up and everything like that.
How much
And
earlier in time? Like, how much would you be able to predict?
well, at that time, it would be within 3 days. And it happened enough where I would go, okay,
Yeah.
I would, okay, something's going to go down here. I don't know what it is, but something's going to go down.
Yeah.
So what I would do in my life is I would make some sort of drastic change, some theta change that I knew would be a positive action, even though I didn't know what was going to happen. And this happened probably, I don't know, a couple dozen times while I was on Excalibur. And once I finished, it went away, and I didn't get ill anymore, kind of just, I don't know, a terror stomach, or I'd just be kind of cranky or whatever. That stopped. And then what would happen is then I would have a deja vu. And people said, well, I get deja vus. Yep, that's fine. And everybody does. And it's a phenomena. It's a real thing. But the thing is that I had a real sense of the fact that there was a fork in the road, and I could see what was supposed to happen and what did happen. And it was always of a positive nature instead of the right fork and something bad happening. At least in my universe, a lot of deja vus would occur where something bad was happening. Excuse me. And instead, I was taking the left fork, and it was positive, and I could see that there was this big change, this big turn. And so it was a little bit of the butterfly effect. The butterfly took a left turn and took a left turn and then took a right and went off in a totally different direction, as opposed to these bad things happening. This is one of the wins that I haven't written up since finishing Excalibur, but it is palpable.
Yeah.
Tremendously.
Yeah, good. And it's lasted as well, has it?
Happens every few days. And then the reason why I bring this up is I really honestly think, and I am not saying that my case state is better than LRH's by saying this, because that's what I am not saying. But what I am saying is I don't think that he got as far as people think he did, because I can see alone because I have to back up a little bit. Knots auditing and what you deal with in Knots is the objective side of Knots' case. Excalibur is the subjective side of the Knots case. Does that make any sense to you?
It does, but it's kind of funny though, because some people say they go, I got into OT3 and it was more, and then I got into OT4 and there was more, and then OT5 and there was more, and so now it's like you kind of saying even past OT8 there's more.
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's a lot, because from OT3 on, you're dealing with Knots technology. That's where Knots started, is with OT3, and where LRH became aware of this phenomenon and everything is open for discussion. And I think Scott Gordon brought up some of it in the past podcast. So, with that in mind, you're looking at Knots being an objective handling, because what you're seeing is the Knots case affect the body. Okay, that's what Knots is all about, is handling undesirable manifestations in the body, among other things. I mean, OT5 is a series of 20-odd different rundowns, 20-odd rundowns that you're doing on the person in audited Knots. and then OT7 is a continuation of that solo. But what you're looking at is you're dealing with these manifestations of, on, near, or around the body. Okay? Now, in the physical universe, and this is the distinction that needs to be made for our listeners, on knots, you're dealing with a result of another universe, and that's the theta universe, and those things that reside in it. Okay, so you have an elbow that's hurting you. Okay, so you can handle that with knots so that it's not hurting you. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to go away, because LRH mentions this in the knots materials briefly, all very briefly. But he does mention it, and Robertson expands upon that in Excalibur, because you're dealing with the pre-OT's interest. Now, on knots, you're dealing with whatever body issue it is, or whatever manifestation of the knots case on the body that is being presented in the physical universe, okay? But you're picking up something that's in the theta universe that's causing something in the physical universe. You follow?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now, that's objective. It's a phenomena that you're perceiving as a thetan, because your ability to perceive has come up quite a bit while you're on the OT levels,
Yeah,
and you're going, okay.
it's basically like you've got eyes, so you look around. You can do objective processing because you look with your eyes. So now it's like when you're out to that level to do it, you've got a new ability which is like OT perception, and you're viewing objectively the OT perception and using it. So it's still just objective.
Yeah, it's still objective, but you're looking into the theta universe with objective eyes. So you're going, okay, well, there's this particular thing on my Zorch. Okay, so let's handle that with Knott's procedure. Okay, so you do that. Very simple. It's extremely powerful, and it works like a charm. It's very, very simple, but anything of any real magnitude of power in Scientology is always in the direction of simplicity. So that's really cool. But the thing is that what you're looking at is you're looking at a predisposition on, near, or around the body that you can perceive. Okay, so you're looking at it from a physical standpoint. Well, okay, so what you do on Excalibur, for example, is you're now looking at things that the person wants to handle subjectively. And you're looking at the person's interest, because you don't do anything on the OT levels unless there's some particular CS program. But the LRH bridge at large on the OT levels doesn't have a darn thing to do with pre-OT interest. It's all set for you, and this is what you do. Well, in Excalibur, you're now going into areas that are charged, that you find on the meter through a DFP interview, and now you're handling those areas from the standpoint of an OT that has really good vision, has 20/20 vision in the theta universe, and can now spot these things, and you're pulling them out by the roots subjectively.
Okay, and hold on. And what about the other independent versions of the higher OT levels? Are they doing a similar thing?
Well, one of them has to do with advanced procedures and axioms, where you're basically doing the entire book, which I highly recommend. But is that LRH's OT8? I kind of doubt that.
Yeah, but is Excalibur's LRH's OT8 as well, with the same argument?
Well, that's a very true argument. It isn't something that's going to be finitely resolved ever, unless somebody has a conversation with the being that was once LRH.
What about what's his face, Pierre? What about his OT8?
Well, Pierre's got, I think, 8, 9, and 10, maybe 11 and above. I haven't been keeping tabs on it, but Pierre knows what he's talking about and everything. But I would just have to say that, again, it's somebody else's idea. It isn't LRH's. We're not going to get LRH's OT8. We're going to get somebody's interpretation. It would be kind of like me covering a Beatles tune. I could do a great job and I could get you to think that, it sounds like the Beatles and everything, but it's not the Beatles.
Okay,
It's not ever going to be the
what about
Beatles.
this? So, have you heard of a guy I think called Peter Griffiths?
I've heard the name, Pete
Oh,
Griffith.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wrote some. He wrote a book. What was it called? It was a good book. It was a good, like, a little bit of an R factor of what's going on Earth. What was it called?
Hmm.
Something. Anyway, but in that he said that LIH finished the high materials and passed it on to someone, and he doesn't tell who. And it's like, oh, great. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess, my viewpoint on that is why would LRH wasn't one to operate on a withhold ever. He was a very upfront guy, and he wouldn't put somebody on a withhold on something like that. And the end result, I would have to say, is if somebody had that and it was LRH, because I think Scientology technology works really, really well. I'm biased maybe, but everything that I've seen, it saved my life twice. So I would have to say that that is a bunch of bunk, because I would like to see the results of that sort of a thing. And I'm not talking about knocking hats off at a distance. I'm talking about, things being better in the field, and not one or two people or a group of people coveting LRH's OT levels and keeping them to themselves, because that is about as un-OT like as you could get. Any OT worth their salt and who was truly OT would make it available to everyone else, or find a way to deliver it in such a way that it wasn't some secret society.
Yeah, but
That's
what if?
not the
Yeah, but
OT
what
life.
if it? What if it has to be that way because of the bad guys?
Well, I don't think that would be the case. There are bad guys everywhere, and then you're just going to have to deal with them. And the thing is that a Thetan needs a game, and that's what this is it's just a game. We've played the same game before, and Scientology has existed before. There was a last time around, and the thing is we're following the same
Hold on a
path.
second. This is really deep what you're talking about, because this is what Pete Griffiths talks about in his book as well. I think his name's Pete Griffiths.
Mm-hmm.
What you just dropped a big bomb there. Like, what the hell? Like, you're not saying you're not saying I was around in the 50s or whatever and doing something. You're talking about something deeper than that, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm saying back on the track that there was another Scientology. I mean, when you do the OT levels, most, not all,
Oh,
most,
okay.
especially trained guys, become aware of the fact that it's called last time around. And this, let me tell you about this.
But was it, no, sorry. What you're saying is it had a different name or something. But we did something like this back ages ago. But you're not saying it was actually we experienced this exact same thing. We've already experienced.
I can neither confirm or deny that. I'd have to say that it leans in the direction of being more like, and being extremely similar than sort of like, or a little bit like.
No, because I'm just saying, because Peter Griffith's idea is the fact that deja vu is the fact that we are reliving something we've already totally been through all before. And that's why it was such a deep thing he was saying. And I don't believe it at all, but I was just like, whoa, what the hell is saying? We've done all this before, this whole battle, we've done it all before. We're completely doing a carbon copy of it again. No, but as in, like, literally, we're doing it like, as in, like, in a Matrix way, as in, like, we're repeating it all again, like, in some sort of bizarre way he doesn't even fully explain. But
well, my answer is apparently that is probably the case.
What the hell? That's pretty wild.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that you become aware of this. I was aware of this long before I was introduced to it in the CBR materials, the Ronsorg, Excalibur and above. I came up with several different datums. I'd never, ever looked at any of the CBR stuff. Now, let me take this an extra step. When there used to be, and there may still be, we used to have a hard drive that was passed around in the field called the football. And all of the data was passed around on this hard drive, and you'd download it, and then you'd send it on to the next person. So they called it a football because you were passing it on and had all the Scientology data. Right.
Is this before the internet was, like, easy to send things over or something? Or?
Yeah. This was like
2000.
I don't know, 2000, something like that. I mean, it's been going on for years. Well, and I'd also come across the CBR data and everything. I deleted all of the CBR materials from my computer in 2004 because I thought it was a bunch of hooey. I never read a sentence, a word, anything other than what the name of the file was. I got rid of it all. That's how much of a holy roller I was. Now, fast forward to 2011. I'm doing my OT5, being audited on my OT5 in Washington. And I come up with these particular concepts, which I can't mention on the show because that would be unfair to people that have yet to do it. I came up with these concepts, and I mentioned them, and my auditor just, thank you, I got that. And then a couple of years later, well, more than that, 2011, 2014, 15, around 2015, I started reading the Excalibur materials, and here were these concepts that were in the Excalibur materials that I mentioned in session, the last time around thing being one of them.
So the idea that we are repeating a whole experience, and that explains for a bit with deja vu and how people can predict the future or something.
Yeah, but I mean, LRH says, and there are universes, and what are the rules of the universe? What are the laws of the universe? Whatever you want to call it. You talk to anybody that's finished through OT7 or OT8 and is a trained auditor. A lot of them are going to tell you that they've run into this last time around thing because it is extremely familiar to most of the trained guys. They know that it's there, it's extant, and it gets mentioned in the materials after Excalibur, and it makes a lot of sense. But I knew about it before I read about it. That's the point I'm trying to make. Is that there were several concepts that came up on their own for me as realities before they were ever presented to me in writing from anyone. So to me, that tells me it's real.
And that gives me an idea of how Captain Bill Robertson would have come up with these things, because it was basically how the whole of Scientology was come up with, in that people look into things, and then they compare their information, and we work out what was going on.
Exactly. You get a roadmap. What did you see? Yeah, that's what I saw. That's why I saw that buzzard on the tree.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because some people say, they criticize the OT3 thing, and they go, well, this is just, it's not like LRH just wrote it and made it up. It's just like, this is kind of like a thing that's there, that's a consensus that like information came in, evidences to conclude that.
Yeah, he looked at PC folders and he came across with, well, this happened here and here and here, and he probably had hash marks on a piece of paper, crossing it off 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. These cases said this about this thing, and that's how they did track mapping and everything. I mean, this is where the history of man came from. Yeah. It wasn't just LRH coming up with this stuff. PCs were saying, yeah, this happened, by the dozens, if not the hundreds, to validate this. And even LRH says on one of the briefing course lectures that somebody ought to do an archaeological hole trap mapping project in order to get all of this stuff figured out as far as time, place, form, and event, when these particular things happened, and what people were in a particular place in the physical universe, if they were in, this sector of the galaxy or on this planet or by this star or whatever.
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think people get confused by the religious aspect, and they think that LRH, we're all in love with him. We're like, oh, he said this. Oh, it must be true. We love LRH. Oh, yes.
Right.
That's how they think that we approach it. So, like, they hear a wacky story and they go, can you believe it? LRH just wrote these things down, and people just believe it and go, wow. It's just like, no, that's not how it works.
No, their awareness level isn't there. But, people tend to especially in this day and the age with the advent of the internet and the click of a mouse and all of this stuff, their attention span is basically that of a goldfish.
Yeah.
And they move on and they put a label on it because it's easier to put a label on something than it is to confront. And there are a ton of mechanisms in the reactive mind in the whole track case to tell you to look somewhere else and don't come here.
Yep. And when they hear of like a podcast interview for 3 hours, it's just like, whoa.
Right,
it's just like, oh my god, what do you mean? It's like whereas I mean, I think yeah, I mean, it's more cooler because it's got more information. Like, as in a 3-minute interview is actually the really bad one. This is how everything's inverted on Earth. The 3-minute interview is just like a little advertising piece by some like scientist, right? Like, the 3-minute interview is just nothing. You know what I mean? Like a 5-minute interview, you can't go into anything. You just can't. You literally can just say hi to a person, cover one little tiny thing, and not even fully cover it, and that's it.
Yeah, you can't do anything justice because it all comes down to comparable magnitudes. And the thing is that the reason why people don't want to inspect Scientology is because they don't have anything to compare it to. Because Scientology isn't like anything else. It isn't like any other religion on the planet. And there may be those that would want to disagree with me. Feel free to write me at travelingknotsauditor@unseen.is if you disagree. But, Scientology isn't like anything else. But the thing is that everybody needs to have comparable magnitudes. And the comparable magnitude that people need to view Scientology with is the fact that if they're unhappy in their life and they want more than the physical surroundings, the entrapment of the physical surroundings and being a slave to the things that you own, Scientology has an answer for you. I could go into a lot more on that, but
Yep.
it's.
Go ahead. We mentioned the tech films ages ago, right? And
Yeah.
I didn't finish that up. I was going to say, so did they screw the tech films like as in compared to the LRH's versions? Like, you know what I mean?
Well, this is a funny anecdote, and Dan Kuhn didn't know about this until I told him on one of the Facebook groups. But once Dan left the church and Miscavige declared him, Dan was the lead character in the TR's film from the 70s. And once Dan was declared, DM digitally had Dan Kuhn's head removed from the film, and they put another actor's head on Dan Kuhn's shoulders because Miscavige is such a nut job. I kid you not.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they've changed them in answer to your question.
No, but as in a bad way. Like are they making these thingos that teach people how to as in I imagine LRH's training on how to do a TR film or whatever in the 70s was like and stuff.
Yeah.
But now is it like getting the order to do like bad TRs like these new films?
Well, see, that's the thing is that LRH directed the TR's film that Dan Kuhn was in. And LRH passed Dan's TRs in the end and throughout by directing that film. Every frame of that film LRH directed and said, this is what this is supposed to look like when it was bad TRs or when it was, Dan's TRs are in at the end of the film and he can audit happily and he doesn't have a hard time confronting people. Okay, so they took Dan's head off, which is what you use to do TRs with, your eyes and your mouth, and what Dan said was changed, and somebody else was digitally stitched into this. So they screwed up the TRs because Miscavige doesn't have any TRs and wouldn't know good TRs if it slapped him in the face.
Yeah, but now what about when they've made whole new tech films that have no digital removing faces, just totally 2010 production? Right.
Well, they've changed the E. Meter Reed's drill film at least once, to my knowledge. I could not tell you what other films they've changed besides that because I just don't know, and I'm not going to tell you something I don't
but
have.
It's
facts
possible
on.
that they've remade the TR training film, for example. If they have made it right, they went from something that was actually directed specifically by LRH to something made by some person in gold in 2008 or something. That's a big screwing.
It's possible, but from what I heard, that's what they did to that one. I don't know if they're using Man the Unfathomable anymore or TRs in their criticisms. I mean, there's quite a few tech training films. There's one for solo auditing, and then I would love to make all of these.
So that could be screwed as well. Like heaps of these things could be screwed.
They could be, but I would have to say that you'd be better off just saying we don't know. But the fact of the matter is it doesn't really matter because there's hardly anybody left in the church anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, so does it really matter? No, because all we're doing is looking at an altar is.
how can indies get these original 70s films and stuff?
They can't. That's why I made the meter reads film. They don't exist in the internet, in the public domain at all. And I doubt that they ever will unless somebody breaks into an org in the middle of the night. Hint, hint, hint.
That would be great, wouldn't it? Though it'll get taken down on YouTube, but you could spread it around in all those formats.
Yeah, I mean, if they still exist, back when I joined staff in 1988, all of the tech training films were on actual film, and it was in a little plastic protective reel, and you plugged it into this projector, and it would play it, and inevitably it would screw up in the middle of it. And then what Miscavige did in the late 90s, early 2000s is he basically robbed all of the churches by selling them this ridiculously expensive sound system, this ridiculously expensive projector that wasn't any better than any other projector. And he came up with all of this smoke and mirrors, and you had to pay it was like $5,000 to $7,000 for this sound system and everything. So because it had to be perfect, and his stuck attention on perfect.
Yeah.
But what it was just. Yeah, it was just highway robbery to the orgs, and they had a hard time coming up with it. And then, instead of being in the digital domain, they put it, wait for it, on film again. So it didn't make any sense. They could have waited a couple of years, and they could have put them on DVDs and put it on an LED display and all this stuff. And they'll probably do that at some point and charge them $10,000 for the LED display when it's all it is a Samsung TV. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me with it.
It is like the whole mafia analogy in that it's like it's just not as obvious. It's more shifty, and it's just like he's walking around basically saying, "You pay your cut, you Scientology organization. You better pay." You know what I mean? Right. And then he goes, "And if any of you leave my association, I'm going to stamp you out, you bunch of squirrels, you independents. You're not going to exist." You know what I mean? It's like, I'm the one who owns Scientology in the world. This is my own, this is the only area where I'm dealing heroin. It's literally like that, you know what I mean?
It is. It's the perfect analog for it. Because, you can't, you're not going to be selling anything on my turf. This is my turf and my turf only. I mean, he operates like a thug. That's all there is to it. He's a mafioso thug.
Let's wrap up. I want to see what you're willing to say. It's up to you. You got to think about it. So we're talking about that OT8 thing. That OT8 thing that was released. That was you think the church made up and stuff.
Uh-huh.
The one that was released in 1988 for like 6 months, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It mentioned something about Jesus, and it mentioned something about Markabian and like Antichrist and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
When I read that, it answered some questions, because I heard a lot of stuff in spirituality where there's this idea that actually it's really epic. I'm not going to say I believe it, all right? Watch out. But it's this idea that actually Christianity was no good, and Lucifer was actually the good guy, because he was coming here trying to set humans free and improve their abilities and stuff. And the god or whatever was actually the bad guy who was trying to make people into sheep and look after them and make sure they stay in their box and stuff. And Christians, and you hear things when you look into spirituality and stuff where Christians say, "Oh, Lucifer was bad because blah 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 blah," and I'll be thinking, hold on a second, that's kind of a good thing that Lucifer was doing. What do you think about that?
Well, from my standpoint of everything that I've done on the OT levels, and other people that I know that have done them too, separately from anything that I've done, to me, the first thing that I would say is that sounds like the most non sequitur, trumped up pile of bullshit I've ever heard.
Oh, you mean this thing the church released in '88?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, and I know for a fact, I asked Marty about it, and he told me that Mark Yeager is the one that came up with it.
No way.
Yep.
So what you reckon because that the thing I'm talking about is just something you read before you even do the level. It's just some introduction. So that was his little introduction that he wrote and put in there.
Yeah, it was some additive, because the thing is there isn't anything on the OT levels that has anything to do with any of the Markabian stuff, the God and Devil, the Heliotrobus implant, all that stuff. It doesn't have anything to do with that stuff at all in name. Now, I'm not saying that some of the stuff that you're running didn't come from some of those things. I mean, LRH talks about, there's a reference there, even a lecture, the Heliotrobus implants on the briefing course, and LRH had an HCLB where he talked about what he had found on the whole track as far as the pearly gates and all of this stuff, and that it was an implant. For me, that's true. I don't have any problem with it. And some people might interpret some of the OT3 materials as part of that particular area, and it wouldn't surprise me one bit. It doesn't have any sway with me now, and in looking at it in retrospect, it worked for a really long time on a lot of individuals or beings. So, but it doesn't have anything. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me that would be a part of OT8. That's something that came from LRH at all. Whether I caliber or anything beyond that or not, it just doesn't ring true at all. It sounds like a bunch of BS.
Well, it does make sense that if you want to bring down Scientology in the church, you'd release OT8 with an introduction that just says outrageous things that would shock everyone. I mean, it was like a big.
Yeah, that I could believe. It wouldn't surprise me a bit that was something that CST came up with or something like that, because there's no money in the cure. There's money in the comeback, and that's what they're doing now with wash, rinsing, repeat on the OT8s and busting them down the bridge and bringing them back up, and all this stuff is to get more money out of them, because there aren't that many people to get more money out of. So that I could believe.
Okay, well, what about the idea about Jesus and Christianity? Are you willing to say that? Are you willing to say what you think, or just keep it quiet?
Well, Jesus. What about Jesus and Christianity?
Well, but if you think, like, as in that,
I mean, I can give you my opinion.
The idea that it apparently was no good, and that he was into interesting activities with younger children or something.
To me, that sounds like somebody that has some really screwed up case that came up with something like that. My opinion, that there was a guy named Jesus Christ. I think he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he had a lot of abilities. Jesus Christ, and many PhD scholars can confirm this. Jesus Christ never said he was the Son of God, ever. That was something that was put in there by the Catholic Church hundreds of years after Jesus Christ had long since departed. So
they've had their fair share of screwing the Christian religion.
Yeah. So, it just kind of goes on, and then ends up popping into Scientology out of the blue, where nothing's ever been brought up about it before. And to me, it sounds like they were just trying to spin in the OT8s or something like that, which is what they're still trying to do with.
Wow.
I mean, with Knott's pre-OTs, they're getting Knott's pre-OTs to this day to re-mock up case and call back Knott's case, even though the issues say otherwise.
The bad guys who run this world really set after Scientology, and were like, we are getting in there and we are absolutely wrecking it.
Yeah, well, the long and the short of it is the reason that Scientology is of such ill repute is very simple, and it's an answer that a lot of people can't understand, and that's because it works. It's as simple as that.
Yep. Well, I think I'm agreeing with you on it, that OT8 thing was just a load of crap, because it was, but it did. However, they're pretty clever people, because do you know how LRH has an unusual way of writing where you're like, what the hell, like this jumpy sort of way of writing? They copied that when they were writing it. So you're reading it and you're like, it didn't sound like it was written by Mary Sue, for example, who you can sort of tell when she writes something. But yeah.
Yeah, he has a distinctive writing style that is separate from I mean, and different from many other authors. I mean, you can tell a Philip K. Dick novel from an Arthur C. Clarke novel to an LRH novel to Heinlein. You know, on and on and on, because they all have different writing styles. And LRH is a great writer, and when he did the OT levels, reading any of his stuff, Mission Earth or Battlefield Earth, it's like a hot knife through butter in comparison to reading Dianetics. I mean, it's night and day, and probably even further than that. I mean, he had become a writer's writer definitely by leaps and bounds by the time of Mission Earth and Battlefield Earth at the end, because it is so well written. And for some, if you were just to take that datum and you were to put it towards this OT8 stuff that you're telling me about, that Leah put on the show, which doesn't surprise me.
Did Leah put the outrageous stuff I was just mentioning? Oh yeah. She actually said it? She read it out?
Oh yeah. To
wow.
her mother. Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I no, I don't.
Like, did it mention the Christian thing? Did it mention the Jesus thing?
Yeah.
So,
she brought it up.
So that's basically spreading. Like, we're thinking that this is just disinformation put out by people who want to bring down Scientology in 1988, and now it's just like, whoa, it's really getting out there. They're just spreading.
Yeah, well,
they're just spreading it.
Yeah, if you were to look at the traits of a suppressive personality, what is she doing? She's passing on bad news and she's passing on false information.
Yeah.
Whether she's aware of it or not, I don't know. But I think that she's just being manipulated and a puppet, because she's doing more harm than she is good. I think she's a very capable and a very able person. I think she was maligned by the church, and she wants to take them down because she feels bad about it. She's got a huge ARC break with the church and Miscavige, and now she's trying to throw other people under the bus. She went after Jade.
She doesn't know who it really is. She doesn't know who really is behind the scenes causing these things and stuff. She doesn't know about COINTELPRO and the FBI and the CIA and all their operations.
Right.
People don't know about the intelligence operations. It's basically secret warfare. It's not open. Right. It's not like they just come and shoot you and like drop a bomb on a place. It's like hidden, sneaky, all this shit.
Yeah, and like LRH says, even he had a hard time confronting evil. And that's the biggest single problem that Scientologists face today, is the fact that they cannot, in the church, outside of the church and not practicing, they cannot confront evil. And it is the biggest problem we as a planet, whether you're Scientologist or not, face, is to be the ability to confront evil. Because and I'm not saying it's a dangerous environment. Being an OT helps, and you can spot it from a mile away. But you don't have to be an OT to confront evil. You just have to be able to confront it. And that's what people need to do. Because this is evil stuff.
I know they can't they just write off as, oh, Bill Robertson was wacky, or LRH was wacky. It's just everything's wacky. Oh, it's wacky. My life makes sense now. Ignore what's going on. They're just wacky. And it's just like, no, it's just like there's all this evidence indicating it. It's just that you're just burying your head in the sand.
Yeah, and because they don't, and even if it's not evil, they just don't want to confront, because it's a lot easier
scares them as well.
to get caught up on painkillers. I mean, which is an incredible epidemic. Things are a lot worse than people really understand. I mean, the painkiller epidemic is the biggest epidemic to face this planet in its history. Really?
Oh, like as in all the different brands, like the headache pill, the blah blah blah.
Well, I'm talking about the pharmaceutical painkillers that the synthetic heroines and things like that people get. I mean, they're just passed out like Halloween candy. And I mean, this is the difficulty that we face as Scientologists outside of the church, because these people, and I'm not even talking about illegal PCs. These people have been sold such a bad bill of goods and so screwed up in life, whether they're caught up on meth or they're caught up on heroin. They're caught up. I mean, here in Minnesota, the largest epidemic facing the Indian tribes in the United States right now and in Minnesota is the heroin epidemic. It's taking these tribes down currently in present time to where the biggest problems they face is a drug epidemic. The grandparents are now having to raise the children of their parents are now felons and they're in jail. And then the felons, when they get out of jail on these Indian reservations, can't get a job because they have a felony on their record. And heroin and meth are going to destroy the Indian societies in North America within the next 20 years because there won't be anybody left. There won't be a generation to raise anybody. That's just the Indians. And I know this by survey because I'm trying to help them with Scientology technology. It's a mess just for them.
If you track society in that, and when drugs kicked in the 60s and stuff, it's just a total degradation of society. Like it's just a perfect way in order to take over society. What do? You go, oh, let's give them these like pills that make them feel happy and shit, and then like you can just walk in and walk all over and take over.
Right.
It's
exactly.
the elite. Because you know what's funny as well is imagine heaps of school kids in the 90s that were like, yeah man, I'm smoking weed at school. I'm like sticking it to the system. Yeah, I'm no rebel. Yeah, take that, Uncle Jim. Yeah, or whatever. And then like they don't understand that the people who are really running society absolutely want them smoking as much weed as they can, absolutely taking all these drugs, being a dumb fucking dropkick, addicted to alcohol. Just that's what they want you to do because they can control you like there's no tomorrow. When you break out of all that shit, you start detoxifying, you start waking up to things, you start having OT abilities where bizarrely you think about running out of petrol and then like a minute later you run out of petrol and it happens over and over again. You're like, what the hell is going on in life? And you start asking questions, you start finding out the truth.
I agree with you completely. I just thought of something that I wanted to bring up when you were asking me about the OT8, the original OT8 from 88. There's an OT8 HCOB that is designated as such, and there's only one that is designated in the upper left-hand corner on the HCOB that's for the OT8 course. And that HCOB is one of the most revelatory HCOBs I have ever read. It is one of these things. I don't know if you've ever experienced this as a Scientologist, but when you have a big win and somebody says, so what did you get off of whatever it was that you had the big win on? And you go, I can't remember because I as-ised it. Have you ever had that happen?
Yeah.
Not yet.
No. But I have a memory
you understand
problem with
what
my
I'm
case.
saying. Yeah. So this particular reference is called Why Thetans Mock Up. That's all I can say.
Can I find it?
No. Well, you shouldn't look at it, but I'm saying it exists, and that's the name of it. And if you go look at it, you cannot hold me responsible for it. But this reference for the OT8, okay, has 0.00000 to do with what you told me that they were saying was the original OT8. It is some of the most fundamental data that one could ever have, and I have to go back and reread it every now and then because it is so mind-blowingly good. I'm sitting here thinking about it going, I'm going to read that tonight when I get back because it is such an undercut to everything that the bridge is about. And to me, that typifies what OT8 was, LRH's intent for what OT8 was about, because it is so amazingly simple, but yet you wouldn't see it unless you were actually there.
Now, hold on a second. But was that, wherever that policy is, like, was that part of OT8 or like where the hell was that chucked in? Like,
well, that's what I'm saying is LRH designated it as part of the OT course check sheet and part of the level.
So there is there is some bits and pieces of OT8 and stuff, and but as a finished form, it's never actually existed.
Right. That's the only bulletin with the designation in the upper left-hand corner for routing that was supposed to be for the OT8 course. And believe me, it is phenomenal. and I'm not one to blow things out of
No, no,
proportion
no.
very
Should, no
often.
so shouldn't technically this is what people who are trying to work out OT8 and stuff, like Pierre Thier and Excalibur at Wrong Thought, they should be putting these things in it, right? They should be finding these things and putting them in.
Yeah, and I haven't seen Pierre's stuff because he holds it pretty close to his vest, and that's totally fine and everything. Which that's a different subject. Um, you know, LRH said, the work was free, keep it so. Dot 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 dot. Pierre. So I
Yeah,
can't
but what
speak
about
as to
the
whether
bad
it's.
guys example though? If they did this to the church and did like was so hell bent on them taking the good tech and that sort of stuff, which maybe the government has it, you know?
Well, I mean, if they do, so what? I mean, they already had OT1 and 2 and 3, and they used that to do the remote viewing programs and all of that stuff, and which there's another whole aspect of that. They used the remote viewing to get an OT to actually find a spot where they could jump from Long Island near Tesla's old lab to Mars. I kid you not.
Okay, well, that's why I want to do a part 3. Are you up for doing a part 3?
Sure.
Okay, well, I think because I've still got a fair bit to ask, and I reckon that'll be it. Just 3 parts, and that's it. But let's wrap up what we were talking about, which was
Yeah.
about. Oh yeah, yeah. So it seems like people need to actually, who are these highly trained people, need to try and find these bits of tech and actually get it together and work out what the OT8, 9, and 10 is and stuff, and try and make it as good as possible. And it's up to you if you want to keep it secret or not. But I understand if someone wants to keep it secret because they don't want to be a target.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It seems to me that if somebody has something and it's really working well and everything like that, they shouldn't fall prey to the "it's mine" and if you want it, you're going to have to pay me an expensive sum, because all that you've done is duplicate what Miscavige is doing, whereas LRH said the work was free and keep it so. And guess what? It ended up on the internet, and everybody has it, for better or for worse. And this particular reference from the OT8 course that LRH was putting together or whatever is one of the best references ever on the OT levels, as far as its succinctness. It's deceptively simple in what it can do, and it's based out of Dianetics and has some of the most fundamental data that affects every being on this planet. And why? And I'll tell you this, and I'm not giving you a mystery sandwich.
Yeah, you are.
Has in it it has in it why Leah Remini is acting the way she's acting, why Marty Rathbun is acting the way he's acting, and why is in that reference. LRH describes it specifically, and he gives a remedy for it.
So you're saying
All
that
we have to do. Go ahead.
because we have answers to why people act a certain way, like we're saying the tone scale and their anger and they're not getting over it. But what you're saying
but
is
it doesn't
you're saying
fix
they're
it.
really real, because there's different levels of like gradients of answers. There's like an answer that kind of answers it, then there's a real hardcore, this is the answer. You're telling me that like this is the answer.
Yeah, it would, if you sat down, and now, they'd have to be in decent shape. Even LRH says in the reference that it would have to be a high power Thetan that you could do some of these things with. But he gives the reason why people get stuck on something. Leah Remini, Marty Rathbun, Mike Rinder, John Attic, the fellow you mentioned earlier, on and on and on and on and on. This one datum that is mentioned in there explains it perfectly. It explains the whole track. I mean, it has everything to do with what OT8 should have been, and it is wonderful. I mean, I have to go and read it every couple of months, and every time I get done, it kind of takes my breath away, because it is so like LRH, to put it so simply that you just go, fuck. That's deep.
All right,
that sort of thing.
You got me excited about it. the last thing I want to say is because we'll wrap up the knots thing, okay? Now, what's this deal with knots? There's some of these, sometimes you hear about these knots people, and I know that they did it in the church, so that makes sense that their case hasn't gone no good. But somebody going type 3 when they're like 65 years old and they did knots in the church. What's the deal with that? Like, why can't, like, because I heard of someone like hearing voices or whatever. So what? Hear voices, go and still do your own thing. But are they just been so messed up case-wise that they're like, oh my God, I hear a voice, and letting it affect them or something?
Well, from the standpoint of knots, if they're hearing voices, they're unflat on knots. That's it. I mean, that's just from a Class 9 auditor's viewpoint.
But why
They're
let
unflat.
why let that go effect of you though? It's, do you know what I mean? Like, as in, I noticed that with type 3 people in a mental ward, it's like, okay, so what? You're hearing a voice. Like, why don't you get on with your life? Like, just ignore it. But obviously,
Well, I mean,
keyed in.
it's one thing to say it and it's another to do it, because these particular aspects of a person's case, and you can't explain away the lower part of the bridge with the upper part of the bridge, because they're separate, and they're separate for a reason, because the duplication, the awareness of the person is gulfs of distance apart, from below clear to OT3, from OT3 to the end of OT7. They're just, I mean, they're unfathomable. Even LRH says that people at the lower levels have no idea the amount of gain that is available in one session of the OT levels of knots, because you just couldn't even describe it to them. It'd be like trying to describe a different universe. So when you find somebody that's going psychotic or something like that, well, they're going psychotic because they've got something in restimulation. They might have an outlist. They might have a PTS condition. They'd be a prime candidate for the L's, because once you finish the L's, you can't go PTS anymore, period. Wow. So, if somebody goes psychotic, they're type 3, okay, and they need a padded room and they need quiet, no restimulation and all that. But, if they're hearing voices and they've done knots, well, their knots is unflat, and they need to get a knots repair and get a repair program, and then get into knots advanced program so that they can get fixed up. Because and this is the last thing I'll say about this, about as far as knots is concerned, is that what you're dealing with on the knots level, both OT5 and OT7, and even Excalibur, and the two little levels above it, is the knots case is so sublime in its control of the individual that you have no idea that you're being swayed by something else. And I don't know if that really describes it very well, but it can knock you out of valence, and you can be acting like somebody else, and you have no idea, or it can put a thought in your head, or it can get you to do something that you wouldn't normally do, because you're unflat on a particular issue in knots. And there's just no way to spot it. Even on OT7 it happens, and then on Excalibur it can happen. And people are like, well, you're not acting like yourself, you're acting really weird. Well, that's because you're being pushed around by the knots case. And that's what happens to these people, like any of these guys that have left the church and they're on OT7. They, and if anybody hears this, I'm more than happy, pro bono, to help anyone that's come out of the church. I'm a Class 9 auditor. I will help you and get a correction list done on you, a knots correction list, and fix these things, because the church has done that for free. They can fly wherever I'm at. I'll meet them and I will repair them. Leah Ramini, any of these people, I will fix them and you will be repaired, because you don't know what you don't know about the knots case, and you've been lied to about it, and you've been mishandled, and we can fix these things, and I will fix them for free. Any of these guys that are in the media, come to me, I will help you. I was reading an article today that you'd be interested in this a little bit. It's a little off topic, but it's on topic because it has to do with knots. Lady Gaga basically made a deal with the devil, so to speak. God. Jesus. And she suffers from fibromyalgia.
What's
And do
that?
you know that it's sort of like your whole body hurts all the time.
Oh
And
gosh,
and
yeah,
it's a really awful condition. And she's a really theta performer, and she's got a lot of energy and everything. And she got involved with the Illuminati, and
yeah.
after she did that, she her basically her career took off, and now she wants to get out of it, and she wants to break the
Oh,
contract
is this
because
what she's saying?
she's
She
saying
actually
this. She
says
just
this.
yeah
Hold on a
yeah
second. This isn't just a conspiracy theory, like as in you're telling me she's saying this, so it's not like Alex Jones going, "Oh, she's into Lucifer and all this, or Satan or whatever and shit," and like people going, "Oh, Alex Jones is just making it up or whatever." It's just like it's coming from the horse's mouth.
yeah, she said this. Google it. I just read it on my iPhone this evening. Seriously, it's all over the net that she's saying this. I could handle her. I could fix her. Any of us class 9s. Trey could. I could. Pierre could. He's class 12. Any of us could. She's hurting. She's really having a hard time with this, and she's being pushed around by the Knots case by these guys that are throwing around some of these nasty. I don't know what else to say, but entities that are part of the Illuminati, Skull and Bones, uh, these
Yeah,
rituals
yeah,
that they do and all
yeah.
this
Because
stuff.
they've got spiritual technology, but it's like it's not good spiritual
Yeah,
technology. So
yeah, it's not good.
yeah,
Yeah, it's the dark side of the force,
yeah,
so to
dark side
speak,
of
and
the force.
everything
Yeah,
like that. And she wants to be handled, but she doesn't know how to handle it, and she doesn't know what's causing these body problems. But I guarantee you, I could fix her.
yeah.
Any class 9 could fix her. I mean, you'd have to get her up the bridge first, obviously. But I would be more than willing to do that stuff pro bono to make a difference for somebody that has made so many millions of people happy with their music and things like that. And that's always been my goal in life, is to do that sort of thing for artist types. I'm an artist as well, and I understand their plight. And they're always surrounded by PTS and suppressives and stuff
Yes,
like that. So
yes, very much.
it's a tough gig. I mean, you're an artist. You know what I'm talking
Yeah, well,
about.
that's why when I read stuff about the 1-1s, I was like, "Oh my god, this is it! This is gold!" I was like, "This is what bloody well happens," because they gravitate towards interesting things or stuff that they get energy from, and then they just freaking bring you down. But anyway,
Yeah, they're parasites.
I remember being around someone who is type 3, and this person wasn't raised in a church and didn't have some crazy religious parents or anything, but they're type 3. And guess what they start saying? They start saying stuff like, "Does Lucifer want me to do it?" No, sorry, not Lucifer. Well, maybe, yeah. Or they say something like, "Oh, the devil said it," or they go, "Oh, Satan," and they say weird shit. And this is like a thing where like you're like, what the fuck is this person who's insane talking about this stuff? Like, why don't they, like, okay, fair enough, they're insane, so like they're going to be strange and backfiring, but why are they backfiring talking about weird things like Satan? Like, oh, Satan, like, you know what I mean? Like, and this is
Well,
where
I'll tell you why that stuff happens. It's pretty simple.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying,
And
guys.
any
Like, there's answers for this in Scientology, but people don't want to
yeah,
go down the rabbit hole of finding out the truth
right.
about this shit because it blows it. They
Yep.
can't handle. It's the exact same as finding out the stuff about COINTELPRO with FBI and CIA and stuff. That it's too big a reality for them. They just go, nah, this is why. I'm not going to find out the why on this one. They give up on finding out the why. They can't confront it.
They can't confront the evil in the whole thing, and that somebody would do that. That's the long and the short of it. But the devil and all this stuff, and I am your nemesis and all this jazz, all of that stuff, that negative verbiage that people get, that's all stuff coming from the Knots case.
Yeah.
And it is handleable, and there's nothing more empowering than to be able to handle that particular part of your case, because you're not just handling your case, you're handling the cases of others. I can say that.
Oh.
And you're freeing beings by doing knots. Okay, I can say that.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So and LH talks about this in the history of man stuff. He talks about it all over the place in the 50s and early 60s. So that's the deal. And the thing is that Scientology is in the trouble it's in solely for the reason, and like I said earlier, is because it works. And anything that frees a being on this planet is attacked,
Yes.
whether you're Mahatma Gandhi, Malcolm
Yeah.
X, Martin Luther King,
Martin
any of
Luther
these
King
guys.
probably got assassinated by like the FBI or some shit like that.
Oh, I am
Yeah.
convinced because I mean, you look at his speeches. Malcolm X was a little bit more, of a hammer and tongs kind of personality. He said a lot of great things. Mahatma Gandhi, what he went through, he was assassinated.
I agree.
Any
John
of
Lennon as
these,
well. I reckon
yeah, I
John
mean,
Lennon. It all makes sense when you look at it and you find out about these intelligence things
yeah,
and what they're doing.
right, because they don't want a force for good out there. They don't want anybody that has the ears of millions of people. I mean, like one of the phrases I use almost every day, John Lennon said, "Life is what happens to you while you're making plans." I think that's, and that explains the human condition too. And this guy, he might have been a cheeky fellow. He wasn't the easiest person to be around, but he had his eye on the ball and he knew what he was talking about when he said, "Give peace a chance." These are the guys they take out.
Yeah, exactly. Can I say something about? There's not much time. We're gonna be quick. I want to wrap up this thing about the Lucifer thing because I do find it interesting. Yeah, there is this idea amongst these secret societies, right? And I don't think they're all bad. I reckon they got infiltrated as well and this sort of stuff. But there's this idea that Lucifer was actually a good. I view it as a good god, like a good alien, a good being from space that was here thousands of years ago that was trying to set man free and not put them into a control system as like some sort of sheep, like we're a sheep or whatever. And they believe that you got to evolve your spiritual beings like the Rosicrucians and advance your beings and stuff, like your abilities, and improve and become a god. And some Christians are like, oh, that's blasphemy, that's terrible, that's outrageous. What do you mean become a god? And they think that it's like Satan worship, and it's like, yeah, it might actually be Satan worship because Satan might actually be the good guy. Do you know what I mean?
Well, like I said, with the materials that I was talking about earlier, where the dichotomies are switched and love is hate and hate is love and black is white and white is black.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me. I don't have anything like that I'm aware of on my track. But, like LRH says, for anything to persist, there's a lie behind it.
Yeah.
And that's the easiest way to make something persist is to invert it to where it's up is down and down is up. And
yeah. It was just interesting when I was
simple as that.
When I was listening to the information, like they were saying, can you believe that they believe this or that Lucifer was trying to do this? And I was just thinking, that's good. That's like setting people free. That's improving them and advancing them spiritually. Whereas the other one is like you're a slave to a god. Like this. Anyway, it's just really interesting. I was just like, wow.
Yeah. Well, if you look at for our readers, you get a copy of Gods of Eden in William Bramley's book.
Yeah.
And read that and read it again and then read it again.
Wow, I've just started reading it, so I'm gonna. Why you have to read it a few times? Does it really have to sink in? It's really deep, is it?
Well, the number, like LRH says, number of times over equals certainty. And the best thing that Bramley does is he really does a great job of time, place, form, and event on these things. And the thing that speaks volumes to me is that I think, was it like 5 or 7 times he was researching why is it that man goes to war with man, and why are we warlike? Yeah. And every time he would take a different angle of attack, and it would always lead to third party by an off-world influence.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then you look at Scientology and you go, well, all right, this is what LRH is talking about, and you look at the whole track and how we got here and where we've come from and all this, and you're just being lied to be controlled. That's the long and the short of it. It doesn't matter whether it's on this planet or another. There's over 200 trillion galaxies, they just stated the other day, out there. We're not the only ones, and this physical universe has been around 300 zeros worth of time. It's a very long time, and that's just this universe.
Yeah.
So, it's a little easier to believe when you look at that, okay, well, it didn't just start 10,000 years ago. I mean, they just recently found out here in the last couple of weeks, it goes back 100,000 years more than they originally thought with some of the things that they're finding, archaeologically speaking, now. So,
Yeah.
it's no far stretch to say that maybe up is down and down is up, like you're saying.
Yeah, and do you know what happens when they find an archaeological find that's like that? It's like from 5 million years ago or whatever. That's like a human bone or something that like is not at all the story that they want you to think. The Men in Black apparently come and take it, like literally, like that's how
anything that disagrees with with their narrative,
and where their mine was, where they found that, of course they shut it down and they can no longer mine there or whatever, because like I'm serious, like this is just like whoa, like there's like a force out there who go and like cover these things up, so they want you to believe that man evolved 200,000 years ago and that we evolved from like some cells and that sort of crap, and they're pushing that story and they don't want you to know anything else, when it's just like, no, there's heaps of things that are found that are outside of that are proving that wrong, and it's being kept hidden.
Yeah, there's a gentleman by the name of, look it up on the internet. His name's William Tompkins, Tompkins.
Yeah.
And he just recently passed away. And he nails it right on the head, and he says every PhD on this planet hasn't a clue that the knowledge that they've been passed on is subverted and basically alter his knowledge, that things have been kept from them to the true nature of how things really are.
Yeah.
Because we're being manipulated.
Yeah.
And we're not only are we being manipulated on the very basics of what our society is based on, we're being manipulated as Scientologists by people who say they were Scientologists, and being pushed into something to get us to walk away from something that has at least some of the answers.
Yeah.
And that is just something that I cannot stomach, and I will fight to the end.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think that's it for the interview. I'll speak to you in a few weeks' time. Thanks for that. And if people want to reach you, how can they find out? Like, you got a website, don't you?
Yep, it's ao-gp.org. You can get on the website, check out the success stories. We've got podcasts on there, a little blog post about integrity as a Scientologist and being honest with yourself. And you can reach me at Traveling Knots Auditor, all one word, at unseen, unseen.is.
All right. Thanks for the interview. See you later, Jonathan Burke.
Thanks for your time. Take care.
All right, so that's it for my interview with Jonathan Burke. I hope you liked it. Next coming will be part 3, and then after that I'll be interviewing somebody who isn't an independent Scientologist, who's actually a Scientology hater. She's written a book. It's going to be quite interesting. Anyway, so that's it for the podcast. I've been Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy. You've been listening to the Indie Scientology podcast. And remember, get up that bridge.